The snow that veiled Winterfell in mute white drifts felt strangely warm to Melisandre, who walked its battlements as though each flake were a slow-falling ember. The air smelled of smoke and pine resin, familiar scents she had come to think of as the breath of the north. Yet behind it she tasted something sweeter. A note of long-frozen roses, the same scent that had haunted her fires for half a moon's turning. Night after night, the vision had come. Petals blue as a cold dawn blooming in a ring of iron and stone. A maiden's voice tangled in prayer, and blood cooling on pale hands that could not stay the tide of years. There, among the shifting flames, she had found her answer. The Lord of Light did not burn merely to destroy. He burned to reveal, and the truth lay buried beneath the crypts where the old kings slept with their stone wolves. She descended the steps in silence, skirts whisking past the torches that flared at her passing. Jon Snow watched her from the yard, black cloak whipped crosswise by a northern gust. But if he wondered why the Red Woman so often wandered beneath his family's keep, he did not ask. He had seen her purpose in his own way, in restless dreams of a father who wore no crown yet knelt before one, and of a mother whose face the mists refused to show. Melisandre, sensing that seed of doubt, understood. Prophecy was a fire kindled in darkness, and Jon Snow's flame burned brightest when stoked by questions he never thought to ask aloud. Soon he would learn that answers could be colder than any wind that howled over the wall. The heavy doors yawned like the maw of some stone beast as she slipped into the crypts. Dust edged each stair, disturbed only by the occasional rat. Kings of Winter glared at her along either wall, their stone swords laid across stone knees, but Melisandre did not bow. These idols belonged to a dead god of dead forests. Her lord asked no permission from bones. At the end waited the newest, humblest sepulchre, marked not by a crowned direwolf, but by a maiden's likeness half lost to age. Lyanna Stark, sister to Eddard, promised to Robert Baratheon, stolen by Rhaegar Targaryen. The statue held a bouquet of winter roses sculpted in rough granite, each bloom chipped and dulled by time. But when Melisandre brushed her fingers across them, color seemed to shimmer beneath the grime, a faint sapphire gleam that faded with her touch. She knelt, pressing her palm to the name carved at the base. In the echoing chamber, her whispered prayer sounded loud as thunder. "Lord, if I serve you still, grant me this boon. Your fire says she may yet speak, if only a tongue is returned to her mouth. Give that tongue voice, and with it, let the lies that shadow this realm be cast into your light." The brazier she had carried sputtered, yellow flame guttering until only a red core remained. Melisandre closed her eyes and reached inward, into the place beyond sight where light and shadow intertwined like lovers. Heat swarmed her blood. She tasted copper, breathed smoke. A heartbeat. Someone else, slow, almost frail, throbbed beneath her ribs, and then a second, stronger pulse overlapped the first. It grew, filled her chest, thundered through the crypt as if the earth itself had stirred. She opened her eyes. The air trembled. The brazier leapt up in a column of ruby light. Ash spiraled above the coffin, swirling to form the vaguest shape of a girl dancing on the winds of yesteryear. Melisandre thrust her hand into the fire. Heat peeled back the illusion of flesh, revealing crimson veins of pure light that lined her arm. When she withdrew her hand, a single coal larger than a fist rested in her palm. She set it in the hollow between the carved roses, and their gray petals reddened like coals awakening from long dormancy. Stone cracked. A thin line scored the lid of the sarcophagus. With a groan like glaciers shattering, the lid slid aside. Frost billowed upward, and within it, a woman lay wrapped in funeral silks that had once been white. Now they were the yellow of old bone. Her hair, dark as raven wings, spilled across her shoulders, and if her cheeks were sunken, her lips were still full, as though sleep alone had thinned her face, but not stolen its gentle grace. Melisandre touched those lips with fingers that glowed. "Awake, child of winter. The dawn has need of you." A breath fluttered the shroud. Another, deeper. rattled through Lyanna Stark's chest. Her eyes burst open, pale gray, star-bright, and frightened. They fixed on Melisandre, then wandered to the crypt vault above, to the rose petals now aflame, to the cold air that steamed white from her mouth. Her first sound was a gasp. Her second, a scream drawn out not in terror but in defiance, sharp enough to make the torches gutter. She clawed away the shroud and sat upright. "Where is my son?" The words shocked Melisandre, but she only inclined her head. "Safe, though he does not yet know you." Lyanna's gaze narrowed. "You are no maester. You smell of smoke and sorcery." "I am the night made flesh," Melisandre replied. "But I am also the herald of truth, and that truth needs your voice. Rise." Lyanna swung her legs over the edge, bare feet finding the cold stone floor. She shivered, an instinct, not a weakness, for the cold no longer owned her. Death had scoured away mortal frailty. What remained was purpose. "Ned," she whispered, eyes filling with tears that froze on her lashes. "Did he keep the promise?" "Eddard Stark kept his promises better than any man I have known," Melisandre assured her, thinking of the boy who wore a bastard's name and a bastard's mantle, yet bore himself like a prince. "But now, others must keep theirs. Will you reveal what he would not?" Lyanna's hand clasped Melisandre's wrist with surprising strength. "I died for that secret. I would die again before it harms him." "Now, then live," the Red Woman said, "and see that it saves him." They clothed her in simple wool, bound in an old chest. Cloth rough against skin that had not felt warmth for nearly 2 decades. Afterward, Melisandre guided her up the winding steps. Each torch they passed surged gold at Lyanna's approach and shrank back to sullen orange as she moved on, as though the flames recognized her. When they reached the yard, ghostly silence reigned. Snow still fell, but the flakes parted around Lyanna in tiny vortices, as if refusing to cling to her reborn heat. Jon Snow waited near the weirwood gate, conversing with Davos Seaworth, but when he saw the pair emerge, his words dried. Davos made the sign of the 7. "Merciful Mother," he muttered, stepping back. Jon came forward slowly. His eyes mirrored nightfall, locked with Lyanna's pale ones, and something inside him quaked. For all his life he had wondered why the statue in the crypts seemed to watch him with sorrow. Now the statue walked, breathed, carried that sorrow in living form. "My lady," he said, voice rough as a stable boy's. Lyanna studied his face. The sweep of dark hair, the solemn brow, the jaw that could have belonged to either Stark or dragon. Tears brightened her eyes again, but she did not let them fall. "You have your father's eyes," she whispered, then corrected herself. "And my brother's spirit?" Her knees trembled. She might have fallen, but Jon caught her. Melisandre spoke quietly to the onlookers. "Fetch the Lady Stark, Sansa, and the maester. Wake every lord in this keep, for before the dawn they must hear a tale no minstrel ever dared sing." Then they gathered in the great hall, torches casting long shadows over banners of direwolf gray. Lyanna stood at one end of the high table, Melisandre at her side, while Jon, Sansa, Davos, Tormund, and a score of northern lords listened. Ghost lay at Jon's feet, white head resting on paws, eyes the color of freshly spilled blood fixed on Melisandre with inscrutable calm. Sansa's composure faltered when she recognized the woman. "Aunt Lyanna," she breathed, sounding every bit the child she had once been, though grief had carved wisdom into her features since. "But father said—" "He said you." "I know what he said," Lyanna answered softly. "He lied because I begged him to." She told them then, in words that trembled yet never faltered, the story of the Tower of Joy, how she had ridden with Rhaegar, not in fear but in love, how war had chased them into Dorne, how she had borne a son whose birth wrung screams from her throat, but left her heart full. She painted Rhaegar not as a golden prince stolen by madness, but as a man who loved music, prophecy, and her. Tears shone in several eyes, but none interrupted. When she spoke of Robert's fury, a hush deeper than morning fell. Jon could almost hear the clash of trident waters, the clang of warhammer on shield echoing across years. Lyanna pressed her hand to her belly, remembering phantom pains. I begged Ned to take the child, to name him his own. A bastard's life is cruel, but better a bastard than a dead prince. Her voice cracked. I never thought the lie would stand so long. Jon backed away as though her confession were a sword leveled at his throat. His world reeled. Every lesson, every sly remark about his blood, every time he had dreamed of legitimization. He found Devos' steady gaze and anchored himself. Is it true? He asked Melisandre. It is written in fire, she replied. Even the cold cannot hide such heat forever. Sansa stepped forward, clasping Jon's hand. Brother or cousin, she said. Blood is blood. You are still of our house. The lords began to murmur. Shock, distrust. A few muttered blessings. Lyanna raised her head. You fear what this means for your wars. I say it ends one war, the quiet war of doubt that has dogged your steps. But more, I say the night is coming, and winter's storms care nothing for bastards or princes. Trust him or perish. At Melisandre's nod, Jon drew a blade of plain castle steel and offered it hilt first to Lyanna. She grasped it. The dull torchlight caught edges that glimmered as though the sword itself remembered songs of heroism. She placed the tip over her palm, sliced a shallow cut, and let her blood drip onto the fire the Red Woman had lit in a bronze brazier. The blood hissed, spikes of scarlet vapor twisting through the flame. Images burst across the seething air. Columns of ice, a wall shattering, dead men marching beneath storms of black snow. The room gasped. Lyanna's voice rang louder than any horn. The enemy is death, yet by his fire I live. If my resurrection offends you, remember that light asks no permission of darkness. The wall has been torn down in 1,000 secret prophecies. I have seen but one path where dawn breaks instead of dusk. Follow that path. Her gaze caught Jon's. Follow him. Some knelt. Others stared uncertain. But Tormund Giantsbane threw back his head and roared approval. Let the boy keep his crown of bastardy, or lose it for dragon's blood. What's it matter? He kills dead things well enough, and that's the only gift that counts. Word spread through Winterfell like fire-racing oil-soaked banners. By dawn, ravens were winging south, east, and west, bearing letters sealed with wax, stamped by both direwolf and three-headed dragon sigils, though Jon balked at using the latter. Sansa insisted, warning him that the lords of the realm would obey only symbols they recognized. Jon submitted but muttered that he would rather wield a sword than a seal. His restlessness grew in the days that followed. He walked the battlements and thought of how a name, once a comfortless shroud, now sat on his shoulders like a too-heavy cloak sewn from molten scales. Lyanna spent her hours with Bran before the heart tree. The boy greeted her with a cool serenity that belied his age. When she fell to her knees beside him, he only smiled. I knew you, he said. I saw you as a girl racing through the Godswood, and I saw you wrapped in flowers that smelled of frost. She brushed back his hair with motherly tenderness born of regret for children she would never birth again. You see too much, sweet Bran. Not enough, he corrected. You will show me the rest. One night Melisandre approached them beneath the crimson leaves. The sea parts, she told Lyanna. Stannis marches from the south with men who still call you Wraith. They will need proof of more than legend. Then let them have it, Lyanna said. I was forged in myth the day my tomb was built. They deserve to meet the iron beneath the marble. Stannis believes himself the prince that was promised, Melisandre warned. Belief is not birthright. Lyanna's smile was cold. Perhaps it is time prophecy woke and choose its champion by deeds, not claims. When Stannis Baratheon's host arrived at Winterfell, banners snapping in the bitter wind, he rode before a column of gaunt knights whose armor bore dents from cold as much as battle. Melisandre had left his service, yet his eyes still carried embers of conviction stoked under her tutelage. He dismounted before the gate, gaze sweeping the ramparts until it found her flame-red hair against the snow-paled sky. Beside her stood Jon Snow, ghost at heel, and a woman wrapped in gray furs, whose face, though older than the songs, was unmistakable, a stark rose that never wilted. Stannis narrowed his eyes. "Sorcery," he spat. "Another false queen conjured to sway weak-minded men." Lyanna descended the stairs, each step sure. "Sorcery or miracle, the dead stand in judgment of the living. Tell me, Stannis, what does a dead woman owe the lies that murdered her?" He faltered. Even kings, self-crowned or otherwise, felt the weight of ghosts. "If you are Lyanna Stark," he said gravely, "prove it. Speak something only she would know." "No." She looked past him to his weathered banner, a red heart aflame upon a stag. "When you were but a lad at Storm's End, you stole a quill from your father's maester, because you wished to draw your own banners of war. You spilled ink over your favorite cloak, and wept because you feared your brother Robert would taunt you. A maid named Jeanne gave you salt to scrub the stain. But it only deepened. You buried the cloak in the stables and took a beating for it." Stannis' jaw clenched. He turned slightly so his men would not see his eyes shimmer. "Only my brothers knew that tale. Robert took joy in repeating it. I learned it from Ned," Lyanna said. "He cared more for your sorrow than your pride. He never told another soul. Save me, while we waited out a storm in the Wolf's Wood." Silence stretched until the breaths of horses plumed like drifting banners. Stannis dipped his head not quite a bow. "Then you are she." Melisandre's eyes glittered, pleased. She addressed the gathered knights. "Behold the power of the true God. Death has no dominion where his flame burns." "Enough," Jon said, voice edged with frost. "We have foes enough without arguing gods. The Night King musters. Either fight beside us or ride south and pray the wall holds." Stannis studied Jon as a smith might weigh a sword he did not expect to favor, yet found balanced. "Your eyes name you Ned Stark's boy," he murmured. "But you stand like a Targaryen, unaware an army's tail may catch fire behind you." He looked to Lyanna. "Your son, I gather." Her answering nod struck like swordplay. "His father died for a realm that would deny him. If you need your banner to matter, Stannis, matter by standing here when winter's teeth close around us all." "Nan." Stannis breathed out a plume of fog. "Then let winter come. I will see it break upon my shield." In those days before darkness screamed out of the far north, Winterfell thrummed with life not felt since before Theon Greyjoy's betrayal. Smithies rang day and night. Maesters mixed wildfire with pitch to pour from the walls, and oil for lanterns burned scarce. Snowdrifts grew shoulder-high, but patrols carved paths until the keep resembled a living labyrinth of white-walled lanes. Through it moved Lyanna Stark, like a revenant queen, her presence stirring both awe and unease. Some touched her sleeve as she passed, hoping, blessing. A few muttered prayers to the old gods, fearing the cost of her return. Children giggled when she braided her hair into a clutter of northern knots none had seen since their grandsires were young. In the evening she taught them old songs about the kings of winter, until the courtyard echoed with haunting harmonies. Jon watched it all, marveling at how easily she commanded hearts. She offered no titles, seized no crown, yet even proud lords bent to hear her counsel. Often she would lay a hand on Jon's arm, a wordless reassurance that he was not alone beneath the weight of new identity. They sparred sometimes under torchlight, her swordwork rusty yet nimble with old memory, his strong but raw. Each clang of steel rang through the bailey like hammer to anvil, forging mother and son into something the realm had never known. One such night, sweat steaming from their brows, Jon finally spoke what had gnawed at him. "I do not know who I am." She set her foot on a practice block, wiping her blade. "You are the promise I begged of Ned. Am I Stark? Targaryen? Bastard? None of those matter." She looked at him with fierce affection. "Bloodlines bind the world in chains. If you hunger for a name, choose one that frees you. I have always wanted one name. Just Snow." The admission tasted like defeat. She cupped his cheek, thumb brushing his scar. Then carve glory into it until no man hears snow and thinks bastard. Let them think king, or slayer of winter, or breaker of fate. Men or wine shower. He laughed, low and bitter. That is a poet's answer. Better a poet's truth than a tyrant's lie. She said, and kissed his forehead. The Night King's scouts came first. Gaunt shapes glimpsed at dusk, leaving tracks that shimmered with frost sparkle, even after torches passed over them. A ranger returned headless. Another returned silent forever, tongue blue and frozen to his teeth. Bran spoke seldom now, but when he did, his words chilled marrow. There are more than you think, he told Jon one dawn, skin pale as the last moon before winter. They march within a storm the size of kingdoms. Inside it, they do not tire, they do not break, but they are not alone. Bran's gaze drifted to Lyanna, standing at Jon's side. Something else wakes behind them, older than death, older than the wall. Melisandre's smile held no delight. The shadow in the east, she murmured. I have seen it beyond the flames, but never so near. She turned to Lyanna. Even your resurrection was a coin paid to awaken it. When ice meets fire, darkness crawls between. Now. Lyanna squared her shoulders. Then we shall give it neither ice nor fire, only steel. When the dead finally came, they did so without horn or drum. A hush fell over the forest, as though every living thing held its breath for fear of being counted among the doomed. Snowstorm veiled the black gate, but through its swirl emerged towers of moving white. Giants forged of rime, mounted wights astride skeletal horses, and the Night King on his jagged throne sled drawn by 12 monstrous elks frozen into living statuary. Yet behind him rose what Bran had warned, a darkness thick as tar, blotting even snow's whiteness, inside which glimmered embers the color of bruised midnight. It pulsed, living shadow lunging in serpentine arcs as tall as the wall itself. Jon's heart hammered. He stood upon Winterfell's inner wall, a line of dragon-glass-tipped spears at his back, and realized that prophecies cared little for mortal readiness. Beside him, Lyanna lifted a plain horn to her lips. The sound she blew was no call to charge or rally. It was a note older than battlefields, the lament of a she-wolf for her stolen pack. It hung over the armies like falling stars. The dead slowed. Even the shifting shadow behind them seemed to coil tighter, listening. Melisandre thrust her hand skyward. Flame erupted along the parapets, swirling into a crown of fire that circled the keep. Sigils of glowing red traced runes upon air older than Valyrian tongues. Snow melted to steam, and steam lifted to clouds that burned. Light for light, she cried. Life for life. The Night King raised a hand and spears of ice arced toward the walls. One struck Melisandre's shoulder, pinning her cloak to stone, but she wrenched free. Another shattered against Lyanna's breast and burst into powder. Where mortal flesh would have torn, only her cloak split, revealing skin unmarred, save the faintest scar over her heart. Lyanna leaned over the wall and met the Night King's pitiless stare. I have taken death's breath, she called. It tasted of failure. He answered by unleashing the storm. Wind howled so fierce spearmen braced their shields or flew backward. Undead surged forward, scaling walls like spiders. Steel clattered against dragon glass, and winter's music filled the night. Jon Snow, born of a secret vow, met them with Longclaw. The Valyrian blade cleaved bone and chill, each swing carving arcs of rippling frostfire. Around him his brothers of the Watch fought and died, and rose to fight again. Lyanna Stark danced beside him, her borrowed sword flashing silver. She moved as she once had on horse and field, wild, laughing, unstoppable, her braid whipping like a banner soaked in stars. But the shadow behind the dead spread wings then, vast and full of holes where moonlight bled through. It was not a dragon, though it bore tatters of one. It was something melted from dragon scale and demon smoke, its roar a hungry echo. It struck the ring of fire, and flame sputtered. Melisandre screamed words none understood except maybe her god. Her hair blazed bright as comet tail. Sansa, watching from the keep's window with archers, clutched the sill. "Hold," she whispered, though to what she spoke none heard. The shadow beast tore through the gate. Wood exploded. Jon leapt into its path, sword caught in jaws of living night. It tossed him aside like straw. Lyanna sprang, driving her blade into what might have been its eye. The creature reared, shrieked, a sound of children crying in winter lost to snowdrifts. It tried to swallow her flame-lit silhouette, but she held fast. Jon staggered to his feet, blood in his mouth. The Night King advanced, frost blade raised. Jon blocked. The clash sang like breaking stars. Steel cracked, Valyrian shards flying. Longclaw's hilt snapped, half-blade spinning away. The Night King lunged. Jon braced for death. A spear of brilliant ruby light lanced between them, burying in the Night King's chest. Melisandre stood atop the wall, hair alive with fire, hand outstretched. The spear was her very heart burning. The Night King's armor fractured. Through the gap Jon saw glacial flesh melt into slush. He thrust the broken half of Longclaw into that wound. Ice hissed, split. The Night King shattered, and with him, the dead faltered. The shadow beast recoiled, shrieking as though tethered to its master's fate. Lyanna yanked her sword free and dropped, rolling as the creature convulsed. It turned to flee skyward, but Bran's voice thundered across the yard, though his body sat still at the heart tree. "Begone to the dark that birthed you." Wind nodded around the beast. Its wings fought, failed. It dissolved into dust that sparkled like soot before the dawn. Silence crashed almost louder than battle. Snow drifted again, gentle now. Lyanna knelt, breath ragged. Jon limped to her, helping her stand. Around them, dead men's bones fell idle, lifeless once more. Melisandre collapsed against a merlon, the spear of light gone, her skin now pale as milk glass. Jon reached her side. "You saved us." "I served the light," she whispered. "But the dawn is yours." Her eyes flicked to Lyanna. Mother and child forged anew. Then she closed her eyes, and her body crumbled to gray ash that drifted off the wall and vanished into the falling snow. When the sun finally climbed above Winterfell's tower, it glinted off shattered ice coating the yard like shards of a frozen sea. Survivors worked through morning hours, burning the remains of enemy dead and friend alike. Bran's gaze lingered on the ashes of the Red Woman. "She said death has no dominion," he murmured. "She proved it." Jon stood with Lyanna upon the battlements. Below, men called him Prince, King, Savior Torar. He felt none of those. He felt only glad for warmth in his mother's hand. "What now?" he asked. "Now," she answered, smiling. "We live long enough to make truth more powerful than legend. We rebuild swords into plowshares, or perhaps into pens. You will show the world that a boy called Snow can plant seeds dragons never dreamed." "Them? Anne? And you?" "I was raised from death, not to fade, but to finish a tale begun in secret." She looked south, where spring would come someday. "When flowers bloom again, I will gather winter roses and lay them at Rhaegar's memory. Then I will see if the world has learned love can be stronger than crowns." Jon followed her gaze, imagining fields where children played free of bastardy stigma. "If it has not, then we teach it." She squeezed his hand. Together. The wall's shadow slipped from them as the sun climbed higher. Snowflakes melted on Jon's lashes. He blinked and saw for an instant, not winter's bitterness, but a new dawn glimmering pink and gold. Wolves howled far off, not in mourning but in triumph. Lyanna breathed deep, savoring air that smelled of pine and possibilities. And in that breath, the realm shuddered, no longer under the weight of buried lies, but quickening toward a future where the truth strode unafraid across the snow, mother and son side by side. The ashes of victory clung to Winterfell for a single breath of spring before the north remembered that battles fought beneath a frozen moon seldom end with sunrise. As the fires consuming the white corpses guttered, Jon Snow, half prince, half bastard, and wholly uncertain, found himself surrounded by living eyes that weighed him with hopes heavy enough to break iron. He had slain the Night King, yes, but elsewhere ravens screeched tidings of queens and lions and fleets, racing the winds of ambition. Winter's teeth were blunted, yet the blades of men were keen as ever. By noon of the following day, a council gathered in the great hall. The banners of House Stark, House Baratheon, and half a dozen lesser houses sagged beneath grime, their colors dulled by soot. Lyanna stood at Jon's right hand in a doeskin jerkin and a cloak of gray fox, as if she had been born for command. Bran sat nearby, chair carved from the heart tree's fallen limb, his stillness too deep for childhood. Sansa presided at the high table with parchment and quill, every inch the Lady of Winterfell, while Davos Seaworth, Stannis, Tormund, and the lordlings of Bear Island, Carhold, and Deepwood reflected every shade of fatigue and faith. The first argument arrived not on noble lips, but in the rattle of chains as Maester Wolkan leaned forward. "The dead lie quiet at last, my lords, but winter fever stalks our wounded. Smoke from the pyres sickens lungs. If we pour all stores into swords and spears for campaigns south, we risk famine before first thaw. Then, we cannot leave Cersei Lannister upon the Iron Throne," Stannis said, voice flinty. "While she rules, no harvest is safe. Gold buys mercenaries faster than seed grows." Tormund slapped the table. "Gold's no use to a corpse. We fought off ice spiders and giant whites. Now you want another march. My people lost half our number crossing the wall to live free of night. Let us breathe." Sansa lifted a hand, calm but unyielding. "Breathe we will, yet each breath must count. The North bleeds, but so does the realm. If King's Landing receives word that the Night King perished and a Targaryen prince stands reborn in Winterfell, we must expect steel rather than sweetmeats." "Then thou." Lyanna's laugh spilled into the hall, startling benches. "They will not know which name to fear more. Snow, Stark, or Targaryen. Let confusion serve us." Jon shifted. "Fear alone wins no peace. We need allies who see beyond old sigils." His gaze flicked to Davos. "The North cannot march alone. The riverlands are ravaged, the Vale cautious, the Reach divided. If we ride south, we must carry more than swords. We carry a story that can mend what Cersei tore." "Mentor." Davos dipped his chin, fingers worrying his bearded jaw. "A story starts with a throne. Yours or Daenerys Targaryen's?" The question cracked the room's fragile poise. Wolves and stags exchanged wary glances. Ink blotted Sansa's parchment where her quill trembled. Lyanna answered first. "Moon turns and kingdoms fall, yet men still ask whose bottom warms an iron chair. My son is heir to fire and ice. Named a bastard all his days," Jon cut in, gentler than reproach. "The realm won't shift because my blood changed titles overnight. Daenerys earned loyalty of armies and dragons. We must meet her as equals, not rivals." "And if she demands your fealty?" Stannis challenged. "Then I weigh fealty against the North's safety," Jon said, steel underlying every syllable. "If a crown splits us where shadows failed, we doom ourselves for vanity." A hush followed. Outside, ravens argued upon ramparts, as though echoing the hall's discord. At length Bran spoke, voice soft yet absolute. "Daenerys sails for Dragonstone even now. A storm drives her fleet, but her dragons bank on warm currents and outpace ships. She will land within a moon and ride north, seeking truth of the long night." "Then?" All eyes turned to him. Lyanna touched her son's wrist. "You must meet her before the Lannisters whisper poison into her ear." "Then I ride," Jon said. "Not as king, not as prince, but as steward of the living. Whoever sits the throne must swear that when winter returns, and it will, Dragonfire walks beside wolf." Preparations began at once. Ghost padded behind Jon through stables where Garrons stamped restless hooves. Armorsmiths hammered dents from backplates. Leatherworkers scraped blood from girths. Sansa oversaw supply ledgers, her neat script filling columns with oats, smoked hare, good Riverland cheese, and dragonglass arrowheads. She paused as Jon approached. "You leave me with a hearth of embers, brother, which you'll fan into flame," he replied, brushing snowflakes from her copper hair. "Winterfell is yours, as it should be. Bran will guide you. Davos lends counsel. Stannis stays under truce, for now." Her eyes, blue as cold midnights, caught his. "And Lyanna. She rides with me. The realm must see mother and son beneath the same banner." "Melisandre." Sansa exhaled slowly. "Some banners bleed more than cloth. Robert Baratheon may be dead, but his legend loves to rise. If Lyanna walks the south, men will call her ghost witch or dragon whore. Protect her as fiercely as she once protected you." "I will," Jon promised. He clasped her forearm. They had abandoned childish hugs for the warrior's grip, and turned to finish his farewells. Lyanna awaited him in the godswood, gauntlets laced, sword buckled high. "The weirwoods whispered goodbyes," she said. "They remember when I vowed never again to leave Winterfell. Yet vows sometimes bend to save what we love." Jon rested a hand on the heart tree's red bark. "Is the South ready for a Stark in wolf skin and dragon's blood? Ready or not, they shall have us." She smiled, fierce as dawn over new snow. "Come. The road is long." Their party numbered but 30. Jon, Lyanna, Davos, Gendry Baratheon, newly confirmed as Robert's natural son. 50 paces behind on a black courser, Lord Glover's nephew Eddard, and a dozen spearmen sworn to house Mormont. They rode beneath gray skies that coughed sleet, then sunlight in fitful bursts. The King's Road, choked by drifts and scattered limbs, slowed them. Yet every mile took them farther from the frozen breath of white fires. Near Moat Cailin they found the neck half-flooded, reeds whispering around toppled causeway stones. Crannogmen emerged like phantoms, heads wreathed in moss, but when they beheld Lyanna, they pressed knuckles to brows, and offered smoked fish and boats to ferry the column. "The Lady of Winter's Rose," they called her, voices tinged with awe. She accepted their gifts with quiet grace, though Jon noted how her eyes misted when a small girl presented a single blue winter rose carved of bone. Lyanna tucked the fragile blossom into her cloak. Evenings passed by campfires. Jon and Lyanna spoke of Ned's boyhood, of Rhaegar's harp songs, of dreams both slain and saved. Davos carved driftwood ships beside the flames, telling Gendry of storms and smuggling and the price of stubborn honor. Gendry listened, hands blackened by forged soot, and confessed he feared no anvil but quailed at heraldry. "I'm no lord," he muttered. "Yet gold cloaks hound me for blood I never chose." "Blood chooses no one," Lyanna said softly, stirring embers with a stick. "It merely remembers. Write your own house words on steel." When they reached the Green Fork, they discovered the twins' gates flung open. House Frey, decimated by northern retribution, had collapsed into squabbling cousins. Lady Rosalind Tully met them in the yard, children gathered like fledgling geese behind her skirts. She bowed to Lyanna, tears glittering. "My lady," she said, "the songs of your wedding were the last sweet memories my mother sung before she passed. To see you in flesh and breath, it is as though grief itself were given mercy." "They," Lyanna's voice trembled. "Keep those memories safe, Lady Rosalind. They cost the realm dear." She blessed the children with a kiss each and left a chunk of Stannis dragonglass, setting it atop the twins' gatehouse, as talisman against any specter that dared rise in that cursed hall again. Onward they rode. Tully bannermen at River Run cheered the wolf and the crown of 3 dragons, painted on Jon's banner, though whispers of Targaryen fire stirred unease among older veterans of the Trident. Jon granted them assurances. Grain wagons would come from the north once thaw allowed, timber crews from the Wolfswood to rebuild scorched villages. In return, River Lords pledged spears should Cersei attempt vengeance for the loss of her undead army at Winterfell. Rumors already wound through taverns of Qyburn, raising monsters of other ilk. At Maidenpool, they learned Daenerys' fleet had reached Dragonstone. 2 dragons blackened the skies above Blackwater Bay, setting Lannister scouts scattering. Tyrion Lannister, as Hand, had begun dispatching envoys to houses sworn to crowns old and new. The game moved swiftly. Jon ordered half their party south to hasten word to Storm's End, where newly elevated Gendry might rally Stormlanders. He and Lyanna would continue toward Dragonstone with only Davos and 3 guards, riding light. Wolves among dragons. Sea mist cloaked Dragonstone when their skiffs thrust onto the gray-white sand below the castles. Fanged silhouette. Clouds roiled overhead, alive with sulfur tinge. Jon caught the distant scream of a dragon, a sound that peeled years from his heart and laid bare a boy's terror, and forced steady breaths. A host waited on the beach, unsullied in tidy ranks, Tyrion Lannister with parchment tucked beneath his arm, and Daenerys Stormborn herself, silver-white hair coiling in a sea wind far colder than the one that once whipped Meereen's harbor. Drogon circled high, a shadow-devouring sun. Lyanna strode forward, her gait unhurried. Coalition of past and present walked at her side. Jon in black leathers, Davos bearing the stag-heart banner of Stannis, its flames stitched in orange thread, 3 northern guards clutching pikes of black shaft and dragonglass blade. When they drew near, Daenerys studied them through a veil of caution. The North sends famed ghosts, she said at length, voice lilting with neither joy nor threat. Some claim the dead walk. I see living proof. Lyanna inclined her head. The dead indeed walk. My son felled their king. I rose only to bear witness. Mouths around them tightened in disbelief. Reverence, fear, Tyrion most of all. He cleared his throat. Your Grace, he told Daenerys, the fire needs proof of its own. Let us hear names. Lyanna turned her gray eyes on him. I am Lyanna Stark, called once the Wolf Maid. This is Jon Snow, raised as my brother's bastard, born of Rhaegar Targaryen's blood. Her words drifted across the tide flats as calm as morning frost. Every ear strained, even waves seemed to hush. Tyrion's quill scratched a shaking hand. If that is truth, it changes everything. No, Jon said quietly. It changes only that lies die today. Daenerys held his gaze. He felt the heat of dragonflame in her pupils, saw too the exhaustion of a woman who buried half the world to reach the shore. She stepped closer until their breath mingled. Do you claim the throne my family forged in fire and blood? I claim the dawn we fought to save, he answered. Take the crown if you must. Wield it for the living, not the ghosts who forged chains of conquest. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition of hearts scarred by duty. Her shoulders eased. A throne alone will not mend what winter broke. Nor a sword, Jon agreed. Tyrion exhaled slowly, as though releasing icons older than faith. Then perhaps a pact, rather than a crown. He unrolled the parchment. A charter of unit, dragon and wolf co-ruled. Sworn to steward the realm until spring sets root. Lyanna spoke before Jon. Prophecies twine like briar. Force them too deep and they bleed. Let 2 rulers share burdens, aye. But crowns weigh double upon love. Her gaze flicked between Jon and Daenerys, reading what seed might sprout there. Davos stepped forward. If charters are drawn in ink, hearts must seal them in trust. The realm has known Targaryen steel and Lannister gold. Give it for once, Stark stone, steady, unbending. He nodded at Lyanna. Lady or ghost? She stands testament. Daenerys considered the smuggler's plain wisdom, then raised her palm skyward. Drogon answered, plunging in a furnace-hot gust that shoved guards to their knees. She touched the beast's snout. Steam curled from nostrils as wide as barrels. Dawn cannot bloom while dragonfire still thirsts for vengeance, she murmured. If the North brought me truth instead of titles, I offer truth in return. I will not burn King's Landing to cinders for the sins of one lioness, but Cersei must stand judgment before the world she wronged. Jon nodded. Then I stand beside you, not beneath. He unbuckled Longclaw's half-mended sheath and drew steel. Oath first. Winterfell and Dragonstone defend each other, and the 7 kingdoms, against any who shatter peace. Daenerys placed her hand atop the blade, palm bare. Oath second. The people shall choose who sits the Iron Throne once peace is won. Her fingers tightened. Jon felt calluses earned in heat and war. Oath third, Lyanna added, laying her own scar-crossed hand atop theirs. That children of tomorrow shall never bleed for the lies of yesterday. Burn the histories that breed hate, plant seeds of new songs. She smiled at Daenerys, an echo of whatever softness Rhaegar once saw. Above their joined hands, Drogon exhaled a column of blue-orange flame that seared the salty air yet spared their flesh. Witness to a pact written in heat but penned for mercy. News galloped faster than wings. Within 10 days, every maester from Old Town to White Harbor copied raven scrolls proclaiming the Pact of Dragonstone, a temporary council of wolf, dragon, stag, and river trout to shepherd war-torn kingdoms into harvest. Cersei Lannister's spymaster Qyburn urged immediate strike. She instead sealed city gates, stockpiled wildfire, and offered bounty on zombies resurrected by heathen red witches. The Golden Company, brought across the narrow sea for her cause, wavered, their sellsword hearts intrigued by a Targaryen heir and a resurrected Stark. Both symbols worth more coin than any queen's promise. Gendry rode hard for Storm's End, banner newly smithed, black stag on gold, crowned heart blazing red at center. Baratheon garrisons, weary of succession debates, hailed him lord by acclamation. In his first decree, he pledged ships and galleys to blockade Blackwater Bay, should Lannister hirelings threaten Dragonstone. At River Run, Edmure Tully released remaining Lannister hostages, citing common cause. Granny Olenna had died months before, but the Tyrell bannermen, under Lord Mathis Rowan, sent grain barges north, repaying an old Stark promise made when summer wheat once saved the Reach from drought. Across the narrow sea, even the free cities watched in fascination. A saga come alive. Winterfell thrummed with revival. Sansa sent wagons south laden with cured venison and root vegetables, daring any robber band to face Mormont axe women. Stannis, ever uncomfortable amid diplomacy, nonetheless drilled troops among winter barns, forging a northern Baratheon regiment dubbed the Dawn's Hammer. Bran's ravens watched every road, ensuring no surprise flanked the fragile alliance. But peace's first test came not from lion or kraken, but from shadows long left to rot. Night in King's Landing fell sweet as corruption. Qyburn's little birds told of galleys massing beyond Dragonstone, of sell sails in Storm's End defecting, of small folk whispering that the Mad King's daughter bore no madness, only dragons. Cersei paced the Red Keep's highest parapet, wildfire vials clinking at her belt. Euron Greyjoy's promise of reinforcements had thinned like morning fog. His iron fleet hunted merchantmen instead, chasing plunder rather than duty. Her womb, swollen with uncertain seed, cramped. Her faith in victory cramped more. She turned to Sir Gregor, undead mount towering silent. If dragons land, she told the walking nightmare, chop off their heads. Gregor's helm nodded, empty eye sockets gleaming dull purple. Yet even he could not cleave Dawn's rumor. In Flea Bottom, hungry crowds listened to red priests claiming Lady Lyanna's resurrection proof of divine mercy. They set bonfires in squares. Flames danced reflections on cobblestones slick with Lannister blood spilled by riotous mobs. Gold cloaks, bribed by sparrow preachers and worn coin, tossed away helms. A city that once cheered wildfire turned now toward a quieter hope. That promise need not always burn bright to shine. When news reached Dragonstone that King's Landing teetered between rage and surrender, Jon convened the Pax Council in the war room beneath the great stone claws. Carved table of Westeros lit by candles flickered across faces tense as bowstrings. Tyrion tapped the Reach on the map. Dull. If Cersei cannot rely on Ironborn or Sellswords, desperation may drive her to ignite the city. Wildfire remains stockpiled under the Red Keep, and Sept ruins. We must move before she strikes. Mender. But not with dragons. Jon countered. A beast's shadow will provoke the spark we fear. A force smaller, quicker. Enough to breach gates, capture the queen, pour wildfire into the sea. Grey Worm volunteered, unsullied. Davos nodded. Add Stormlander sailors to secure sewers where wildfire shards lie. Lyanna laid a dagger tip on the Crownlands. I enter the city in secret. Speak to the small folk. If they see the ghost of the Wolf Maid, their loyalty to the lioness crumbles. Jon's heart lurched. You risk walking into traps. I walked out of death. She reminded mildly. A few knives in darkness hold little dread. She clasped his forearm. Trust me to leaven a nightmare with living truth. Daenerys watched mother and son, weighing past mistakes. I cannot sit idle while others bleed. She drew a steady breath. But I will not burn them. I ride Drogon only as shield. Circle above the bay, ensure no fleet breaks your flank. The plan formed like frost patterns on glass. Delicate, rapid. With swift tide they sailed, unsullied in Stormlanders and black-hulled skippers. Lyanna with Tyrion disguised in rough-spun. Jon in leathers carrying no sigil save a direwolf pin at his throat. Davos smuggled them through dusky weather into the mouth of the Blackwater hours before dawn. King's Landing smelled of rot and juniper smoke. Streets once paved in gossip rang now with prayers to strangers, old and new. Jon led Grey Worm's vanguard through the Dragon Gate just as a pale wind rattled, broken sept bells. They moved like whispers toward the Street of Sisters, where wildfire vaults lurked beneath tumbled stones. Meanwhile, Tyrion and Lyanna slipped into the wine sink once called the Woolly Bear, haunt of rebels and lost boys. Lyanna stood upon a crate, hood falling from raven curls. Torches cast her silhouette upon plaster, cracked by sea. You know my name? She called, voice threading the murmur of drunks. You heard lies that I was stolen, that dragons burned me. Yet, here I stand. I tell you all. The Dragon Queen comes not to scorch but to heal. Stand aside, and live free of the lion's fangs. Bow. A hush fell. A ragged armorer raised his rag-swaddled stump. My son died in her father's wildfire, he croaked. What oath says she won't finish his burning? Lyanna's eyes gleamed. An oath written in the blood of winter and the tears of Valyria's last daughter. Would you refuse mercy's hand because death once wore a crown? The man lowered his gaze. Around him, others nodded. The direwolf risen became proof that impossibilities might grant hope, not horror. Far across the city, Jon and Grey Worm breached the first catacomb. Soldiers quenched torches, replaced them with lanterns of damp cloth. Wildfire jars glowed sickly green, stacked like rotten jewels. Davos men rigged ropes, lugging casks to sewer grates where river water could swallow them. Each evac felt like diffusing storms coiled inside glass. Sweat froze on Jon's neck despite furnace heat. He pictured Cersei's finger twitching near some unseen trigger. The trigger, however, loomed far grander. On the Red Keep's balcony, Cersei stared across the city, hands clenched about a brass rod wired to ancient pyromancer braziers hidden beneath the courtyard. Qyburn's contraption promised a chain reaction. Pull once, ignite 70 caches. She trembled, not from fear but fury that fate cornered her within walls her father built. Sir Gregor loomed, breathing like bellows. Cersei lifted the lever, then paused at the distant roar of cheering. She slipped to the battlement lip. The crowd below parted around a woman lifted on shoulders. Dark hair, winter cloak, wolf pin glinting. Lyanna Stark raised a sword to the dawn as though saluting the son she'd been denied. Cheers thundered, drowning the queen's heartbeat. A chant rose. Peace for the living. Truth for the realm. Menetramo. Cersei's grip tightened. Betrayal by small folk cut deeper than steel. Ungrateful rats. She hissed, shoving the lever downward. Nothing happened. Qyburn darted up the stair, wheezing. Your Grace, my birds report the wildfire tunnel's flood. Damp sabotage. Cersei spun, eyes ember bright. How? Smugglers, unsullied, half the catacombs stripped. She struck him with gauntleted backhand. Find another way. Below, Jon Snow and Grey Worm finished hoisting the final cask into the bay, where Stormlander sailors rowed fast, tossing the jar overboard into brine. As the cask sank, murk turned a faint ominous green, then fizzled dull. Jon exhaled. Sudden roars rumbled overhead, Drogon and Rhaegal, for the green dragon had followed his dam, circling the city's outer ring. Their shadows sent gold cloaks fleeing. Yet no flame dove. The dragons only screamed warning. Stand down. Soldiers wavered. The Golden Company, perched at Mud Gate, debated coin against conscience. Their captain, Harry Strickland, spied Jon helicoptering across the rooftops on a grim charger and smelled in the wind the shift of fortune. Gold buys life, but pride buys graves. He ordered horns blown to parley. Within the Red Keep, Cersei realized the city slipped beyond her talons. She barked at Gregor to fetch her horse. They would ride to the cellar door, ignite last reserves by hand. But as they strode across the courtyard, a man in battle-scarred crimson stepped forth. Jaime Lannister, breeches dirt-stained from days in tunnels. His gold hand glinted, sword quivered in his flesh. "One. Stay your wrath, sister," he said. "The war is lost. Do not lose the realm." "Tsh," she spat. "I swore to protect the living," he answered. "That means protecting them from you." Tears blended dust on his cheeks. He blocked her path. Gregor swung. Jaime parried, golden hand crunching under the gargantuan's mace, but steering the blow wide. A duel of brotherhood and doom raged across flagstones cracked by hidden vaults. Sparks danced. In the end, Jaime bowed steel through gaps in Gregor's armor, severing necrotic tendons. The behemoth fell, helm rolling like a midnight moon. Cersei screamed and lunged, dagger flashing. Jaime caught her wrist, twisting gently yet inexorable. "Enough," he pleaded. Footsteps thundered. Jon, Grey Worm, a cadre of Unsullied. Cersei saw them and sagged. All games ended, only reckoning remained. A fortnight later, in the half-ruined throne room of the Red Keep, a council assembled beneath shattered dragons coiling the vault. No iron throne awaited. Wildfire detonations stripped guilt from the spires, leaving an empty dais. Instead, a simple wooden bench stood at chamber's heart. Daenerys stepped forward, cloak swirling. She addressed thousands gathered in sun-cracked courtyard beyond. Nobles of every region, small folk, freed unsullied, Dothraki riders clutching braids undone by peace. The symbols of old power lie burnt. She proclaimed, "Let the living forge new ones." She gestured at Jaime and Cersei, the former kneeling, the latter shackled. "Justice must be seen, yet mercy shapes tomorrow." A hush. Lyanna, arrayed in maiden's armor borrowed from myths, descended the dais steps with Jon. She raised her voice, wolf clear, Targaryen warm. Cersei Lannister shed innocent blood. Let her stand before the realm's judgment. But heed, vengeance fed the long night. If we cling to rancor, dawn will sour. Then, Tyrion read charges. Lords voted, no heads rolled. Exile to Old Town's silent sisters, labor among plague wards, exile across the sea for one who wore crowns as masks. Cersei's scream of rage echoed down burned corridors, but commoners sighed relief. That evening beneath the Red Keep's broken ramparts, Jon sat with Daenerys, Lyanna, Tyrion, Sansa, arrived by swift galley. Gendry, Arya newly returned from Bravos, and Bran whose eyes shimmered starfire. They formed a circle around a low fire. No iron, no marble, only warmth. Wine passed. Arya teased Gendry about lordly airs until his cheeks burned brighter than coals. Sansa and Tyrion sketched frameworks of elective monarchies. Bran murmured glimpses of summers yet to bloom. Daenerys brushed Drogon's scaly brow where he snoozed like a monstrous cat. Jon watched Mother and Queen share quiet laughter over half-remembered Rhaegar ballads. The sight placed peace deep in his marrow. He sipped wine as stars kindled above the ruin, and realized the weight of crowns had slipped unnoticed from his shoulders. Winter's heir, dragon's son, bastard no more. Yet what mattered in that moment was merely the crackle of logs, the scent of jasmine drifting from palace gardens daring to sprout again. "What will we call this time?" he mused aloud. Lyanna rested her head on his shoulder, voice sleepy. "We'll call it ours." Daenerys smiled, laying her hand atop theirs. "And pray our children remember, we chose seeds over swords." Dawn crept across the sky. Pale blush melting soot, gilding broken towers until they resembled colossal candlesticks, awaiting fresh flames. From the bay came gull cries, hopeful and hungry. Somewhere a bard tuned strings, ready to spin new songs. Of the ghost wolf who walked again, of the prince who relinquished crowns, and of a world that beneath dragon wings and dire wolf howl, dared finally to dream of spring. Even before dawn's rose gold faded to the crisp blue of a nascent spring, workmen clambered over the ragged masonry of the Red Keep's outer wall, hacking loose scorched blocks and guiding new stones into place with ropes that creaked like slow heartbeats. Jon watched from the charred span that once served as Maegor's holdfast bridge, ghosts stretching at his side while a smell of mortar and sea salt drifted on an unsteady breeze. Below, the city thrummed, half ruined but fiercely alive, as if King's Landing were a maimed hound refusing to lie down. A fortnight had passed since Cersei's quiet exile, yet every morning spawned a fresh tangle of crises. Grain caravans diverted by outlaw sellswards never reached Flea Bottom. Euron's raiders tested the galleys guarding Blackwater Bay. Lords arrived daily, some to pledge aid, others to measure which way the wind of power would blow. Tyrion quipped that they were trying to hammer a shattered realm into a crown without melting the shards first. Jon understood too well. An anvil cracked by war flipped sparks both bright and blinding. He descended the steps, boots scraping soot, and found Daenerys pacing the courtyard with Melisandre at her shoulder. Rhaegal dozed across the inner rampart like a slumbering green hill while Drogon, restless as ever, circled high enough to cast a lazy, ominous shadow on the harbor. "Another raven from Sunspear," Melisandre said, handing a scroll crested by a sun and spear seal. "Prince Coran Martell invites you to a la Ruta del Viento." The wind rode. Daenerys' Valyrian accent curled around the summer-tongue syllables. "They want a formal tour to prove our pact protects Dorne's trade." She sighed. "Every kingdom demands reassurance. Each oath we swear breeds two more questions." Jon offered a wry smile. "Give them answers written in stone, and they'll ask why the stone isn't gold." She stopped before him. In the early light lines of fatigue scored her brow, but her eyes kept their bright edge. "I thought defeating the dead would be the hardest battle. I was wrong. Peacemaking is war by quieter means." "Then Sir Trusty." "Quieter," he agreed, "but just as bloody if we falter." He glanced toward the courtyard's far end, where Lyanna and Sansa bent over a slate board strewn with colored glass stones, drafting a scheme that mingled trade routes with grain allocations. "My mother has half the city listening to her as if every word were snowmelt in drought." Sansa learned that trick too. "You'd think they'd been ruling together for years." "You sound thankful." "I am, and a little afraid." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Winter taught us to wield swords. Spring demands we wield hearts." "Menderol." Daenerys' expression softened. She brushed an errant coal-black curl from his eyes. "Hearts guided me to you, Jon Snow. Let them guide a realm as well." He took her hand. Heat flickered between their fingers. Unspoken promise, fragile but real. Around them the city's noise swelled. Hammer on iron, children's laughter chasing pigeons across rubble, the shouted orders of unsullied engineers raising scaffold poles. It sounded, Jon thought, like a broken harp restrung, a little sharp yet unmistakably music. By decree of the Dragon Wolf Compact, the first assembly of realms met within the shell of the dragon pit. The once ruined dome had been hastily cleared of weed and ash. Tiers of stone seats, cracked by wildfire blasts, became benches for scions of every house, great or small. The floor, a sweep of drafted sand ringed by blackened chains, now bore a circular table carpentered from the masts of shattered Lannister warships. At its heart lay a slab of smooth obsidian engraved with the words, "Here we mend what swords have sundered." High above, Boards patched a ragged hole where an adult dragon might squeeze through. Light speared down, painting shifting bars across faces, upturned in mingled awe and suspicion. John entered first, accompanied by Davos and a pearl-robed maester from Old Town who clutched quills like spears. Lyanna strode beside him in gray leather dyed subtly by red stitching. When murmurs rippled at her resurrection, she met them with an easy nod, granting fear no purchase. Daenerys followed, hair braided with tiny shards of dragon glass, Tyrion at her elbow. Then marched banners. Silver trout of Tully, green seahorse of Valerion, the newborn crowned heart stag of bastard Baratheon, golden arbors of Rowan and red wine, even the kraken of the Iron Islands, new minted under Lady Asha Greyjoy, who arrived in a coat sewn from sail canvas instead of sealskin to show she sought trade, not plunder. The Vale and the Reach, the Stormlands and Dorne, each found a seat. Missing was House Lannister's lion. Jaime sat alone, stripped of sigil, save the plain surcoat of a penitent knight. His chair remained at the table's far side, but none disputed his right to speak for the quiet hills of the Westerlands. The debt of his confession weighed heavier than golden armor. Tyrion rapped a short mallet against the table rim. Lords and ladies, knights and free men, masters of quill and coin, by order of the realm's compact, this assembly seeks to forge laws equal as the circle that gathers us. We are not a court of kings, but stewards of tomorrow. Let our tongues cut truth and our ears suffer honesty. Melisandre. The maester's voice, thin but steady, called the roll, acknowledging each house and the numbers they supplied for rebuilding roads, feeding refugees, garrisoning border forts. Then the floor opened to petitions. A fisherman from the Claw Isle stepped forward, rough hands twisting a salt-stiff cap dotty. My sons hauled nets in Blackwater Rush all their lives, he said, voice cracking. But your war sank ships that poisoned the shallows. The fish die. Who pays the hunger? A hush, as stark as any battlefield lull. Daenerys answered, the Dragonstone treasury will fund divers to clear the wrecks. If nets are ripped, we replace them. She turned toward Gendry, whose new lordship stretched uncomfortably across his broad shoulders. Lord Baratheon, Storm's End commands the mouth of the bay. See that salvage proceeds. Sail by sail. Gendry nodded, cheeks reddening beneath a smith's stubble. Your grace. I'll put hammer to hull. Approval murmured through the tears. Small folk hearing solutions instead of platitudes. Next stood Lady Mage Mormont's granddaughter Aelys. Slender and fierce in a hauberk too large for her 14 years. The great bears starve, she declared. Our boats sailed north to harpoon summer whales, but icebergs litter the Gulf even now. We need grain, more than gold? Sansa rose from among northern delegates. Winterfell pledges 100 wagons of oats and barley, she said. In return, Bear Island sends timber to rebuild the orphan wings at River Run. She glanced at Edmure Tully, who offered a grateful nod. Deals bloomed like seedlings thrusting through ash, each trade weaving houses once sundered by old rivalries. Dornish olives for Vale iron ore, Reach huntsmen guiding Riverlanders to lands abandoned since the war. Ironborn shipwrights teaching Crownlanders to caulk hulls stout enough for the Stepstone storms. Not every discussion ran smooth. When Lord Harris Swift, a stooped Westerlander with sunken eyes, rose to demand restoration of Lannister mines seized by rebels, shouts echoed from Riverlord's still nursing memory of the Red Wedding. Jaime stood slowly, his gold hand knocking the table with dull finality. If restitution is owed, he said, let it be paid not in blood, but in copper and sweat. The Westerlands will set aside 10% of mine yields for a decade to rebuild the septs my sister raised. He paused. I will swing the first pick. Stunned silence met the vow, broken only when Arya Stark's quiet, lethal voice drifted from the shadows behind her sister. A Lannister swinging a pick. Is that a new jest? Perhaps, Jaime answered, managing a rueful smile. But if so, let the realm laugh. Tyrion recorded the pledge with a flourish, quipless for once, and the assembly moved on. All day they bartered burdens until parchments lay layered like pastry on the table's black core. As the sun sank through the dragon pit's broken crown, John stood. "There is one debt we have not named," he said, gaze sweeping the benches. "The wall lies shattered in many spans. Without it, wildlings and southern folk share one storm front. We must heal more than stone. We must heal histories." He gestured to Tormund Giantsbane, lounging near the back, with arms thick as oak branches crossed over his chest. Tormund rose, beard bristling like fiery straw. "We bled alongside you south o' the wall," he growled. "But Southron still spit, wildlings like a curse. If you want peace, give my people land, not chains." John's voice carried across the pit. "Beyond the wall is a graveyard of permafrost. The North grants holdings in the new gift, fields left fallow since the long night's first rising. In return, free folk patrol, the Frostfang passes. One realm bound not by walls, but by watchfulness." "Then?" Lyanna stepped forward. "My ancestors built those walls to keep their fears at bay. We now build doors instead of barriers." She looked at each lord, stubborn, unblinking, until mutters faded. The vote passed, narrow yet decisive, marking the free folk's first lawful settlement inside the Seven Kingdoms. When twilight claimed the sky, torches flared along the tiers, and Tyrion signaled recess. Lords drifted toward makeshift pavilions for wine and supper, but many small folk lingered in the sand bowl, examining the obsidian disk as if its promise might rub off on calloused palms. John climbed a stairwell cut into the pit's ragged wall and stepped onto an outer parapet, needing air unsalted by politics. Below, the city's lights bloomed one by one, a scatter of candles on black velvet. He thought of nights beyond the wall, where only auroras danced. Those memories felt far older than his scars. Footsteps approached. Lyanna joined him, cloak snapping lightly. "I watched you speak," she said. "Your father would have been proud." "I barely remember him," John admitted. "Sometimes I fear I stitched my own memory from stories and glimpses, but you knew him well. Better than anyone." She leaned on the parapet. "He'd vanish for hours into the godswood, when our mother scolded Benjen for muddy boots. When he returned, peace followed him like a shadow." "I chase that peace," John said softly. "But every answer breeds new questions. The realm clings to crowns. I would cast them into the sea." "Give folk time." Lyanna's breath steamed. "Change is eldest of beasts. Strong yet slow." He caught her hand. "I worry about you walking among those who once swore to Robert. Some will blame you still." She laughed, a sound like water over stones. "Let them. I am proof their hate was wasted. Hate struggles hardest against the mirror." Thunder grumbled far off, an early spring storm massing over the stormlands. Lightning forked, and for an instant, the Red Keep's towers flashed silver. John frowned. "The air tastes wrong." Lyanna felt it too, crisp, but edged by something older than weather, a metallic tang of winter's ghost. They exchanged a glance, the memory of whites still raw. Yet the dread passed as quickly as it came, leaving only distant thunder rolling seaward. That night Daenerys dreamed of black wings beating against a moonless vault, each wingtip bleeding sparks that fell like fiery snow. She walked a narrow causeway between two abysses, one choked with ice, the other roiling flame. At road's end stood a door fashioned of living bone. When she touched it, the bone shifted, forming a woman's face, cheeks carved by sorrow, eyes pale as dawn behind cloud. Lyanna Stark's face. The bone face parted lips and whispered, "Choose." Daenerys woke in a cold sweat, heart stammering. Drogon dozed curled outside her balcony, hot breath tossing steam into pre-dawn chill. She stroked his snout until calm seeped back. As dawn bled across the Blackwater, a raven arrived from Old Town. Samwell Tarly's neat hand reported unsettling news. Pages discovered in sealed vaults beneath the Citadel's oldest wing hinted that the White Walkers were only the first of 3 shadows, awakened by magic's return. Ice, then fire, then the veil of sighs. Whatever that cryptic phrase meant. Sam wrote that peculiar storms over the summer sea kept shifting southward, as though chasing something unseen. He begged for dreamers' scrolls from the Isle of Lys, where red priests claimed comets spoke in fire tongue. Daenerys carried the letter to Tyrion during the midday recess. He read it twice, brow furrowing. Your grace, prophecy breeds dread like rats spawn in ships. Too many to chase, too quick to catch. Yet Samwell's warnings rarely prove idle. He suggests a conclave at Old Town. She said. Maesters, red priests, green sight under bronze tutelage, any who rid deeper rivers. Knowledge is our armor. Men, and our weight, Tyrion murmured. He looked out across the dragon pit, where lords argued taxes while dragon skulls hung above like mute judges. Another assembly, another seat for discontent. But ignorance cavorts costlier than counsel. Summon it. Ravens flew within the hour. 4 days later, as the assembly hammered final lines of the compact, elective succession, tariff parity, sentinel treaties, word came that Euron Greyjoy's long-prophesied big raid had struck Tarth. Sapphire Isle's beacon tower burned green, wildfire looted from Cersei's secret stores, and smoke plumed high enough to blot the stars. Worse, the Iron Fleet had captured Gillyflower, a highborn niece to the Martells, bound for King's Landing to wed peace between Dorne and the Reach. The hall erupted. Lord Rowan slammed a fist, demanding reprisal. Asha Greyjoy rose angrily, swearing she'd haul her uncle back in chains if given ships. Tyrion's mallet pounded order, but voices crashed like tides until Bran, seated in a wicker throne near the pit's edge, lifted one frail hand. The hush that answered seemed woven by unseen threads. His sapphire-tinted gaze swept them. Euron sails under a storm not born of wind, he said. A whisper rides his masts. Something calls him from the deeps. Asha barked a laugh. He worships the drowned god. That fool thinks every riptide speaks his name. Bran's lips barely moved. This voice is older still. Lyanna and Jon exchanged grim looks, memory of that shadow-bound beast they had fought in Winterfell's yard. Daenerys straightened. I will not allow terror to spread while we argue treaties. The dragons will fly. Then? Sansa objected gently. If dragonfire raises ironborn ships, coastal villages drown in flames as surely as in blood. Jaime added, and the realm will see the old fears confirmed. Targaryen fire for every slight. Tension knotted the room like braided rope. Jon spoke low but clear. Then I sail with Lady Asha. A quick strike to sever Euron's head before his storm swallows more. Daenerys opened her mouth to protest, but Lyanna touched her arm. Let the wolf swim. She said, voice layered with trust and challenge. Jon's sight cuts truer on a deck than in a throne room. Reluctantly, Daenerys consented. Asha mustered 30 swift longships, half-crewed by free folk eager to test southern waves. Gendry sent black-hulled galleys forged at Storm's End, streamlined like spearheads. Davos swore he would pilot the flagship himself. Before departure, Jon visited Bran beneath the heart tree, transplanted to the Red Keep's Godswood courtyard. Roots encased in soil shipped from Winterfell, so the old gods might whisper even here. Bran sat motionless, pupils pools of mist. Tell me what waits at sea, Jon asked. Ghost slept at his boots, white fur ruffling. The eye, Bran murmured. Searches for a lens. A lens? A shape to give its will a spine. Euron believes he is that spine. Bran's breath puffed, though the day was warm. The eye may choose another if he fails. Can it be destroyed? Eyes close when darkness sleeps. Bran's head tilted. But sleep is seldom eternal. Jon tucked the riddle away like a dagger that lacked a sheath. The flotilla slipped from Blackwater Bastion at dawn, sails crimson under streaks of pink sky. Davos stood aft, squinting at wind shifts far beyond the mast tops. Storm brewing hard, he muttered. Greyjoy's herding us into his teeth. Asha planted boots wide on the deck. Good. Ironborn no calm seas breed lazy fighters. She slugged Jon's shoulder. Ready to gut a kraken, Snow Prince? I've gutted worse, Jon answered, though his gut churned as brine sprayed his face. They made Tarth by nightfall, finding the harbor choked with debris. Charred masts bobbing like graves, gulls wheeling over bloated corpses. Fires still licked the lighthouse ruins, painting sapphire cliffs a hellish amber. Survivors waved torches from sea caves, signaling aid. Jon ordered boats lowered. Free folk swimmers dove without command. Children sobbed as they were hauled aboard. A woman, clutching a blood-soaked infant, whispered half-mad of black sails that sang. Not songs, she wheezed, but screams turned backward. Jon's skin crawled. They sailed on, tracking Euron's path through burnt fishing pueblos. Each ruin echoing the same story. Sudden storms, voices in wind, sailors stabbing comrades in frenzy, then laughing as ships burned. On the third night, a dense fog swallowed the fleet. Lantern bells tolled lost. Davos cursed, unable to read stars. Then a wail rose ahead, a horn blast, half wail, half man dying. Out of mist loomed silence, Euron's flagship, ribs plated in weirwood carved with leering faces. Lanterns glowed green behind eye-slit prow. Sails lashed by unnatural wind, even as surrounding air lay still. Arrows whistled. One thudded into the rail beside Jon, its tip fused of dragonglass and pale silver. The shaft pulsed faintly, as though breathing. Euron strode the forecastle clad in a coat of patchwork skin. Some pieces human, others scale from sea serpent. Moonlight revealed his grin, too wide. Ah, the little wolf who thinks himself dragon-kin? Come to taste the storm? His voice seemed to echo from water and sky at once. Jon raised Longclaw, Valyrian edge dark in the fog. The realm you raid now stands united. Drop sails or join the drowned. United. Euron laughed. Even gods quarrel inside your mother's womb. I serve a greater tide. He lifted a conch painted in symbols older than R'hllor. At its blast, silence ruptured into shrieks. Figures swarmed up Silence's side. Men, yet their eyes swirled like whirlpools, mouths foaming seawater. Grapnels flew. Ironborn and thralls clambered onto storms and galleys. Battle erupted, decks slicking with brine and blood. Asha hacked a grotesque whose face shifted between foreign counts. Its screams sounded like gulls tearing flesh. Free folk wielded axes, shouting oaths to their bare-hearted spirits. Jon fought through a press of thralls, each strike of Longclaw severing limbs that dissolved into spray. He reached Silence's deck. Euron awaited, a long axe carved of deep-sea coral and black iron in hand. They clashed. The axe bit Jon's pauldron, splintering leather. Longclaw slashed Euron's coat, drawing ichor blacker than pitch. The fog shifted around them, forming a corridor of leering faces. The weirwood carvings on Silence seemed to writhe, mouths chanting a tongue older than grief. Euron swung wildly, eyes gleaming like storm lantern glass. I heard the eye before birth, he hissed, parry clanging. It spoke of a door in the deep, of songs only drowned hearts can sing. I will open that door with your mother's living key. Jon grimaced, shoving him back. You know nothing of her. I know the eye desires dragon flame, but it will feast on wolf blood if need be. Euron spat brine. Come now, bastard prince. Your end will mark a new tide. Their blades met again, sparks hissing like rain on coals. Jon forced him to the rail. Lightning flickered in the fog, revealing shapes twisting beneath the water. Serpents? Ghosts? Or illusions fueled by the eye? Euron lunged low. Jon pivoted, letting the strike slide past, and plunged Longclaw into the gap between coral plates at Euron's thigh. The pirate howled. Black blood gushed, sizzling where it struck the deck. Jon withdrew, but Euron seized his wrist, grip vice hard, dragging both toward the rail. Look, he hissed. See what comes. The fog parted. Beyond Silence's hull, a spiral vortex opened. vast as a keep's courtyard, churning ink black. From its maw rose a tower of water, choked with skeletons bound by seaweed cords. Atop the pillar loomed a single eye, formed of glimmering oily membrane, center pupil glowing sickly green. It rolled, fixating on Jon. Terror punched his lungs. Memories of the shadow beast at Winterfell surged. This was its root, older, deeper. Euron's laughter rang as thunder. But from the mist behind silence a roar answered. A roar of fire. Drogon burst forth, wings bloated with flame, Daenerys astride in riding harness. She dove, mouth yawning, unleashing a torrent of red gold. Flame scored Silence's deck, scattering thralls. Euron released Jon, leaping back, coat aflame, but not burning. The great eye reeled, outer membrane blistering under heat. Water hissed to steam. Jon scrambled clear as Drogon soared upward. Asha's flagship rammed Silence amidships, hull timbers cracking. Davos' galley loosed ballistae bolts tipped with wildfire vials. They plunged into the vortex sides, exploding green within black waves. Euron shrieked words without shape, calling storm. Lightning speared Drogon's tail. The dragon screamed, banking hard. Daenerys clung, hair whipping white. Rhaegal, smaller but nimble, streaked from cloud-banked to shield his brother, blue flame-licking vortex spume to fog. Jon regained his stance. Euron lurched toward him, half-coat charred. "You cannot kill what the sea loves," he spat. Jon lifted Longclaw. "The sea loves nothing," he declared, and drove the blade deep into Euron's chest where blood and brine mingled. The pirate staggered, laughter dissolving into choking gurgle. He toppled backward over the rail into the hungry whirl. The eye roared a soundless roar. Its pillar shuddered, then collapsed inward, swallowing wrecks and corpses alike. Silence cracked in two, stern vanishing beneath froth. Jon leapt to Asha's deck as boards shattered behind him. Lightning faded, fog dispersed, shredded by dragon wing beats. When dawn found the survivors, shards of silence floated among sizzling wildfire patches. No sign of Euron or the eye remained. Asha spat over the gunwale. "Good riddance." Jon watched burned water swirl. "If the eye lives," it foundered. Daenerys landed Drogon on a broad spar of driftwood and dismounted. "Whatever it was, it fears fire. We will keep flames lit at every shore until Sam's conclave learns more." "Them?" Davos joined them, weary but grinning. One storm calmed. 10,000 to go. Back in King's Landing, news of Euron's defeat spread like spring wind, raising cheers in markets and halls alike. Yet Bran's face remained troubled when he greeted Jon beneath the transplanted heart tree. "You closed the eye but did not blind it," he warned. "It searches still, for cracks in the world's shell." Jon swallowed. "I feared as much. Sam brings records of ancient Valyrian mirrors, devices used to bend magic into shapes. Perhaps those who wielded such shadows warred long before the first men. We must read, learn, prepare." "Benawinde." "We will," Jon promised, though weariness dragged his bones. Lyanna joined them, wiping sap from her hands after pruning dead twigs. She surveyed their somber faces. "The eye waits. Let it. Life refuses to pause." Together they walked toward the palace gardens, where Daenerys and Sansa oversaw children, both small folk and noble, planting saplings in soil enriched by dragon ash. Laughing, the children pressed seeds into furrows, while Rhaegal watched, wings folded, as if guarding tender sprouts from unseen frost. And as the sun dipped beyond chain-mended walls, Jon felt, beneath all dread and doubt, a quiet certainty rooting deeper than fear, that each seed given time and care could split stone harder than crowns, and send green shoots curling toward a sky no longer ruled by ice or flame alone, but by the stubborn, fragile will of the living to grow. The sky above King's Landing ripened toward summer, that brief season when the capital smelled less of rot and tar and more of honeysuckle climbing broken balustrades. By dawn the harbor mists lifted early, unveiling shipyards where carpenters tapped the ribs of new cogs, and the silvery scales of Rhaegal's discarded moult glimmered like hammered coin upon the water. In the Red Keep's yard, Jon rose before the third watch, habit clinging from snowy years upon the wall, and joined Grey Worm and a cadre of Unsullied in their silent drills. He wore no badge, save a direwolf stitched small at his throat, yet each soldier's gaze found him with a certain expectancy, the look men reserve for a commander who listens with his eyes as much as his ears. When the day's rehearsal of sword and spear ended, Jon crossed the courtyard to the stables, Ghost padding at his heels. He saddled a lean chestnut courser gifted by Lady Asha. Rides like a seal slips water, she had proclaimed, and set off alone through the awakening city. It was his habit now, these unheralded circuits at sunrise, to test the pulse of the streets before heralds and hawkers clogged the lanes. A king, he had decided, learned less from councils than from cobblestones. He passed vendors sweeping stoops and bakers ferrying loaves from soot-streaked ovens. Children dashed between mule carts, chasing hoop and stick. Ravens haggled overhead like black-winged merchants. At Cobbler's Square he dismounted and fed crusts to pigeons, watching them quarrel and scatter. There he met Nedra Waters, the bastard minstrel whose broken lute he had mended weeks before. She offered him news between chords, rumors of gold cloaks, gambling rations, whispers that Old Town's priests argued louder than Old Town's lords, and a curious tale of sailors glimpsing a green glow far to the southwest, beyond stepstones, as though the sea burned from below. Jon filed it away, another echo of the eye, perhaps, and dropped a silver stag into her cup. She bowed low, plucked a soft refrain for luck, and he rode on. At mid-morning he entered the small hall, where Daenerys, Tyrell envoys, and Sansa hashed out grain tithe schedules. Charts sprawled across trestle tables, quills scratched like beetles in a jar. Gendry leaned over a ledger, brow furrowed as though sums offended him personally, while Tyrion perched on a stool, alternating sips of arbor red and snips of sardonic advice. Jon kissed Daenerys' brow. She smelled of ink and roses. "You missed breakfast," she chided. "I ate with the streets," he said. "Did they taste of bacon?" "More like hope. Tougher chew." He gestured to the parchments. "How fares the harvest?" Sansa answered, flicking russet hair behind one ear. "The Reach pledges twice its earlier yield, but wants half its levy paid in iron and timber. The Riverlands have timber, not iron. We juggle their demands like mummers." Gendry grunted. "Forge works at Storm's End can cast pig iron enough to barter, but charcoal's dear." Tyrion swirled his cup. "Trees grow, lords prune, and coin flows downhill. The trick is keeping each slope green." Jon scanned the columns. "I trust your judgment. Today I ride for Old Town with Lyanna, Bran, and Grey Worm. Sam's conclave gathers by week's end." "Bendo." Daenerys straightened, worry creasing her brow. "We should fly, not ride. If the eye stirs, you'll need dragons. And leave King's Landing undefended." Jon shook his head. "Your presence keeps warhawks quiet. Besides, Melisandre's squads patrol the Roserad. We'll be safe enough." Sansa placed a hand on Daenerys' arm. "The city believes in you," she said gently. "Let them see their Queen of Ashes turn builder full-time." A faint smile ghosted Daenerys' lips. "Very well, but take Rhaegar's harp with you. Music soothes restless hearts." Jon laughed. "If Bran's prophecies sour, I'll charm shadows to sleep." They departed next dawn. The column numbered scarcely 20. Jon, Lyanna, Bran born in a wicker howdah upon a placid grey destrier, Grey Worm with 6 unsullied scouts, Sam's wife Gilly now steward of his scroll chests, and Maester Wolkan carrying healing salves. Arya joined uninvited, smiling thinly when Jon raised an eyebrow. Old Town's docks teem with coins ripe for plucking. She said. "And some mysteries require sharper eyes than maesters possess." They rode west along the Mander, meadows of goldenry waving like captive sunbeams. At nights, Bran's ravens circled perimeter. Lyanna sparred with Arya by moonlight, laughter and clangs ringing across tents. Jon found solace in small talk with Grey Worm, who confessed he slept poorly in cities larger than Astapor. Here, among hedges and field larks, he felt the air taste of possibilities. On the 5th evening, they reached Brightwater Keep, seat of House Florent. Lady Elia Florent, fresh from widowhood, greeted them with curt courtesy, smiles thin as candle wicks, but quartered them generously. Over supper, she voiced concern about whispers of a green fire haunting the sea lanes. Fishermen swear some nights the water hisses and steams, though moonlight glistens calm, she said, fingertips trembling on her wine goblet. Their nets rise empty, as if everything fled below. Bran lifted his pale gaze. The sea dreams of storms long forgotten, he murmured. Dreams have teeth. Conversation died like a smothered wick. Later, Jon found Bran beneath a pergola of flowering vines, staring into a polished copper pitcher filled with water. The boy's reflection rippled, eyes glazed. "What do you see?" Jon asked. "Paths," Bran whispered. "Threads in darkness. One coils round Old Town like a serpent of fog. At its heart is a tower older than Hightowers know. That would be the High Beacon." "Not that." Bran's voice dropped, distant. "Below, a well of black light." Jon swallowed. "Can it be sealed?" "Perhaps. But the key is forged from laughter." "Laughter," Jon repeated, baffled. Bran blinked out of his trance. "The eye hates joy. Where mirth thrives unbound, its void recoils." Jon stared. "We'll host a feast. Or a song." Bran offered a faint smile. "We'll see." Old Town loomed days later, swirling ivory spires and terracotta roofs cradled by a silver ribbon of honey wine. The Hightower's beacon flared amber in midday sun, more lighthouse than fortress now, though armored guards patrolled rampart galleries. Gulls wheeled and cawed above docks dense with masts. Their party clattered across the famous cobbles, past statues of robed scholars, toward the citadel's arched gateway. Maesters in gray and white bustled like ants, eyes alight with academic greed. Samuel emerged from within, cheeks rounder, smile broader. He clasped Jon's hands. "You came, and Lady Lyanna, by the 7. He bowed awkwardly, starched chain rattling. Gilly beamed, presenting Dell, their toddling daughter, who squealed at Ghost's towering nose. The direwolf endured pats with patient dignity. Sam ushered them into the scriptorium's vaulted entry, where desks groaned under piles of tomes. Fires crackled in hearths, fed with cedar logs scented faintly of lemon. Storage crates left from when the seas brought exotics before war-dried trade. Scholars from Volantis, Lys, and even Ashai arrived, Sam explained as they wound through corridors. Red priests debate with septons about metaphysics of shadow, while summer islanders claim the eye matches legends of the Black Mirror, devouring sunsets. Jon whistled low. "You've caged more lions than a pit. Some bite." Sam opened a heavy bronze door and gestured them into the night bell chamber, so named for an enormous bell suspended from oaken rafters, rung only in times of knowledge birth or kingdom threat. Dozens of scholars stood clustered at a half-circle dais. Caburn, freed from crown service, but leashed by scholarly curiosity. Archmaester Ibro's silver mask of caution. Kinvara, high priestess of Volantis's red temple. Crimson eyes luminous. A stoop-shouldered Lysini dreamer robed in star-printed silk. And a trio of silent sisters. Faces hidden behind bone. Their murmur hushed as Bran was borne in. Sam cleared his throat. "Let us begin. The eye, as we call it, may be connected to 3 primordial forces referenced in Valyrian obelisks. Krythos, frozen oblivion. Firent, shadowed flame. And Altheria, veil of sighs. The White Walkers embodied Krythos. The eye might represent Altheria, for ancient glyphs depict a single orb, wreathed in waves and laughter, turned to tears. Dendamno. Kinvara inclined her head. My fires show a mouth of night beneath the sea, older than Aralor's first spark. It feeds on fear. The Lyseni dreamer countered, accent lilting. Your fires shape truth like hot glass. I dream beyond fire, within the moon's cold mirror. There I see a gate, not a mouth, and a little boy at its threshold. Benderu. All eyes swung to Bran. He met their gaze without flicker. The gate exists. You named it apt. But I am not the boy. I am only his echo. The prince at the gate died thousands of years ago, when he laughed at his own fear, and sealed oblivion behind a curtain of stars. Now the curtain frays? Lyanna spoke, voice firm. How do we mend what he left? A new echo, Bran replied. A song stronger than dread. The sound must ring from tower to shore. From living hearts. Bain? Jon raised Rhaegar's harp. Tadachiu. This? Perhaps the first string, Bran said, but we need 1,000. Sam gestured toward a rolled parchment map. Dada-dee. We propose a festival of unity, a convergence, staged across every port. Lanterns, dances, choral recitals, all at once. If Bran's theory holds, collective joy could weave a net of resonance the eye cannot pierce. Qyburn snorted softly. Forgive my skepticism, but songs seldom stop storms. They do when storms feast on sorrow, Kinvara shot back. The debate flared. Science versus faith. Steel versus song. Jon listened, weighing possibilities. Eventually he lifted a hand. Argue if you must, but we lack time. The eye struck at Tarth. It will strike again. We plan the convergence. If we fail, we fall back on Dragonfire. Abro sighed, scribbling notes. The Hightower's bells can coordinate midnight peals. Citadel ravens reach every rookery within 2 days. Arya, leaning in a shadowed arch, spoke for the first time. Songs require singers, and singers need safety. She flipped a dagger. I'll handle that. Word of the convergence spread swift as rumor. Minstrels, mummers, septas, red priests, Summer Island drummers, even Braavosi pantomime troops trekked to coastal towns. Bell founders tuned steeple clappers. Shipwrights strung harbor masts with colored glass lamps. At night, training fields echoed with rehearsal of newly penned hymns, mixing Valyrian cadence with the old tongue's throaty vowels. In King's Landing, Daenerys oversaw construction of a concert dais atop the ruins of the dragon pit's outer ring. Rhaegal perched there, humming low dragon notes, oddly calmed by choirs practicing. Jaime, recovered from Silence's demons, taught pages to hammer iron sheets into handbells. His gold hand proved a surprisingly steady striker. Gendry forged great kettle drums, whose skins he stretched himself, sanding frames until they gleamed chestnut. He laughed more these days, stealing glances at Arya when she returned with dagger, and grin after silent sorties against smuggler dens, rumored to house eye cultists. Sansa noted the looks with quiet amusement. In Old Town, Bran meditated at the base of the Hightower's foundations, ravens swirling above like black smoke rising from a single point. Lyanna heard him murmur each evening, threading names of rivers and stars into soft incantations. She stood watch beside him, hand on sword, and kept doubt at bay. The convergence came on the last full moon before high summer. At twilight, Jon ascended the Hightower's spiral, climbing 50 flights to the beacon platform. The sea stretched wine-dark, dotted by lanterns of anchored ships. Above, the moon hung enormous, its halo tinged faint green, a worrisome omen, yet also a challenge. Bran awaited, Grey Worm at his side, watchful. A wind tugged Jon's cloak as the boy spoke. When the first bell tolls, play. Jon strummed Rhaegar's harp, tuning. Below, in the great square, thousands gathered, citizens, nobles, sailors, to hear. Sam raised one arm. Bells rang. Their echoes rolled across water. Jon plucked the opening chord. A 7-note scale. Minor, yearning. Then a lift into major triad that felt like sunrise on frost. In King's Landing, Daenerys joined with a clear contralto atop the dragon pit dais. Her voice carried through speaking tubes the unsullied engineers had rigged. In Gulltown, a chorus of children followed, flutes tracing Joan's melody. On the Shield Islands, drummers thundered syncopated heartbeat. Lanterns swayed as if dancing. Waves foamed luminous. South of the arbor, fishermen swore they saw tiny sparks on every crest, as though stars settled to listen. Then, as the second refrain soared, the sea itself sang back, low, mournful. From the western horizon, mist unfurled, spiraled toward Old Town. Within, faint green light pulsed. The eye. Gray worm stiffened. It comes. John kept playing. Fingers steady. Voices rose, louder. Bran's eyes rolled white. He whispered languages no living tongue spoke. Ravens answered, cries melding into chords. The mist hour reached the breakwater. Ships' lanterns flickered, though no wind blew. The harbor boiled. From its froth, shapes emerged. Flayed phantoms, mouths stretched wide in perfect silent screams. Water wights, conjured by despair's echo. They slithered onto docks, their touch frosting wood to brittle crystal. Lyanna, stationed at wharf, drew steel and slashed one. It split like water, reformed. Gray worm signaled unsullied archers. Dragonglass arrows slowed the apparitions, but did not fell them. John shifted key, chords brightening. Bells tolled again, joined by hundreds of handheld chimes across the city. Laughter broke from children at Plaza Center, unspurred. Pure delight at the bells' music kite skipping through marble canyons. That laughter struck the whites like sunlight on fog. They hissed, forms wavering. In the dragon pit, Daenerys called to Drogon. The dragon roared an answering note, harmonic, almost melodic. His fire jetted skyward, not at foes, but straight into night. The flame blossomed red-gold, incandescent. Rhaegal echoed, green plume intertwining. Their fire illuminated the capital's choir, peasants, nobles, sellswords all singing one hymn. Back in Old Town, the eye swelled, membrane rippling. It seemed to strain, pushed by invisible tide. But for every shriek of void it unleashed, a louder sound replied. Cheers, whistles, drums, the ring of blacksmith hammers on makeshift anvils, every joyous clamor mankind possessed. Bran's voice cut through. John the crescendo. He struck the final sequence, fingers bleeding on wire. 7 chords cascading, each modulating up a step, ascending like stairway of light. On the last, Bran clanged a small silver bell. Its tone pierced the din like arrow of dawn. The eye convulsed. Its green glow fizzled to sickly yellow, then dimmed. Mist, shredded. Water whites melted, leaving puddles that steamed and evaporated. The sea hushed. Silence fell, deep, reverent. Then the harbor erupted with applause, cheers rolling wave upon wave, drowning even the gulls. John zagged, harp clutched against his chest. Grey worm exhaled. Did we win? Bran's eyes cleared, weary, but serene. We reminded the void it was empty. They spent a week confirming. Scouts along coast reported calm seas, no green fires. Ash-eyed dreamers sent riddles of thanks. Even the silent sisters lifted veils long enough to smile. When John returned to King's Landing, daisies filled the streets. Daisies, he learned, symbolizing laughter reborn. In the Red Keep's garden, he found Daenerys beneath a lemon tree transplanted from Dorne. She plucked a fruit, tossed it to him. The world sings again, she said. He caught it. Inhaled citrus. We hammered the song into a shield. Not alone. Her gaze shone with quiet pride, and perhaps love. What now, shieldsmith? He considered. We rebuild gates, roads, mines. Teach children chords before swords. Maybe hold the convergence every year as reminder. And no. A breeze rustled leaves. She stepped closer. And us? We learned to laugh too, he said, and kissed her under the lemon boughs while Ghost trotted off, bored of diplomacy. Seasons wheel, stories fade. Yet some nights sailors swear they hear distant bells across tranquil seas, echoes of that convergence, keeping watch for eyes that hunger. In the citadel, maesters file scrolls under the heading, "The Laughter Ward," describing how joy tempered oblivion. They debate still, but their arguments end in smiles. North in Winterfell, Sansa's letters speak of grain silos overflowing, of free folk teaching southern farmers snow capture irrigation. At Storm's End, Smith drums accompany wedding dances where Arya and Gendry whirl, sparks of mirth flying from blade and hammer. On Bear Island, children etch runes of happiness into driftwood charms. They toss into the sea each solstice, tokens to remind waters who rules their shores. And sometimes, when dusk settles over the refurbished Dragon Pit amphitheater, Jon and Daenerys sit side by side upon a modest wooden bench, no throne in sight, and listen to the city's voices. Markets closing, lovers quarreling, apprentices singing bawdy tavern tunes while lugging casks. Each sound is song enough, proof that the living still choose laughter over silence, light over the eyes' forgotten darkness. Jon plucks a note on his harp, one last chord hanging in the warm air, and lets it fade, content. The song of bells and harbor drums faded, but its echo wove quietly into the city's hum, threading through every cobbled street and crenellated shadow until King's Landing itself seemed to breathe deeper, like a convalescent waking from a fever dream. Summer unfurled over the capital in fragrant waves, lilac spilling from ruined balconies, jasmine claiming blackened archways, fresh painted shutters blinking bright hues across districts, once dressed only in ash gray. Jon often paused at odd corners to marvel. A child chalking flowers on broken flagstones, a pair of former Sellswords teaching street urchins, the footwork of Braavosi water dances, an old septon confessing jokes instead of sins in the shade of a half-rebuilt sept. Each sight reminded him how swiftly the living filled silence, how vigorously joy rebounded when given even the smallest plot of ground. Yet quieter currents moved beneath that optimism. In the vaulted counting house beside the Iron Bank's temporary branch, councilors tallied coins against ambitious ledgers, rebuilding roads to Sunspear, dredging silt from Old Town's harbor mouth, restoring shattered aqueducts that once carried mountain snowmelt to the Crownland's scorched fields. Every new column of figures birthed a fresh debate about tariffs and tithe exemptions. Tyrion delighted in such arguments. He claimed numbers were an orchestra of tiny dragons, breathing harmless, manageable fire. But for Jon they felt like pale shadows of the real labor, forging trust between people whose wounds still wept. Even among allies old habits lingered. When the Lords Declarant of the Vale arrived with 300 men-at-arms, ostensibly to guard supply caravans, rumors ran wild in the wine sinks that bronze-clad knights meant to occupy the city for the realm's safety. Gendry diffused tension by hosting those knights at his newly minted Baratheon forge, letting them judge a tourney of farrier apprentices. But Sansa still posted double watches along the city wall until the last of the Vale contingent rode home. In Riverrun, Edmure Tully wrote that Frey cousins squabbled over each bridge fee on the Twins' Causeway, threatening to choke grain flow unless compensated with Western silver. At Storm's End, Lady Asha's letters spoke of Ironborn resettlement on the Cape of Wrath. Some villagers welcomed hardy mariners. Others demanded the sea wolves be driven back into their longships. Peace, it seemed, required constant shepherding. Yet the most delicate flock grazed behind the Red Keep's walls. There, under the lemon tree's spreading branches, Daenerys convened the nascent council of electors that would, if their painstaking charters survived quills and tempers, oversee the first open succession in Westerosi history. Months earlier the idea had felt intangible, almost mythic. Now it took shape in the scratch of quill and the clack of lead seals. Every great house would seat one elector, alongside delegates from the Faith, the Citadel, the Free Cities, and the Small Folk. Tyrion dubbed it a many-headed dragon. Half in jest, half in warning. Jon, who preferred arrow-straight chains of command, nonetheless lent his quiet weight to the effort, if only because each secret negotiation subtracted one more spark from the tinderbox of rival crowns. The first true test arrived with a scattering of unexpected snowflakes on a midsummer night, a brief, eerie flurry that sent maesters scurrying for almanacs. The next morning Bran summoned the core of the compact to the solar of Maegor's tower. Jon found the boy seated beneath arched glass, pale as dawn. Ravens perched along the sill behind him, heads all turned east. "I saw ice on the summer sea," Bran said without preamble. A finger of cold stretching toward Lys. Tyrion raked a hand through his beard. "Another eye?" "No," Bran murmured. "Something older even than that emptiness. A hinge left ajar when the eye recoiled. I believe the world shifts on it." Grey Worm's mouth tightened. "Threat?" "Not yet. But if the hinge swings wide, winter may slip where it was never meant." They pored over charts until candles guttered, arguing currents and fault lines. Daenerys sent swift riders to Dorne's coast to measure sea temperature. Gilly's careful tallies revealed migrating whales had veered far south of their usual course. By week's end, a pattern emerged. All anomalies pointed toward a single island far beyond the Stepstones. An uncharted blot sailors called the Shivering Isle, rumored to be a dragon graveyard or a pirate haunt, depending on which dockside tale one favored. None had reason to sail near it, until now. Preparations began in secret. Jon proposed a lean expedition. The black-hulled Stormrunner, fastest galley in the royal fleet, reinforced by a captured Ironborn longship, retrofitted with scarwood planks. Grey Worm would command the Unsullied Marines, while Davos served as navigator. Tyrion volunteered as envoy, citing experience with both dragons and doom. Daenerys consented under protest, extracting a vow that Drogon and Rhaegal remain behind to safeguard the capital. She herself would stay. Two rulers could not vanish simultaneously, she reasoned, lest opportunists gnaw at the fledgling council. Jon reluctantly agreed, though her eyes told him she despised sending him where she could not fly. Lyanna insisted on sailing. "I walked the dark once before," she said, buckling a weather cloak. "If shadows lurk abroad, better they meet a woman already counted among the dead." Arya slipped aboard unannounced. Tormund's free folk scouts discovered her packing dragonglass needles into hidden sheaths, and when Jon confronted her, she shrugged. "You'll need someone who answers riddles with steel if your diplomacy sours." She stayed. They departed beneath a dawn, the color of unripe peach. From the city walls, children waved yellow pennants sewn from grain sacks. Daenerys stood on the quay, in a gown of silver thread that caught the sun, refusing to shed a tear as Jon clasped her hand one last time. "Return before harvest," she commanded. "The small folk will think you fetched them summer if you come back with green leaves in tow." "I'll bring a bouquet," he promised, voice rough. She touched his beard, then stepped away. Horns blew. Oars dipped. The Stormrunner slid from harbor, prow cutting bright ripples that quickly darkened as the ship passed beyond the headland. Days at sea merged into a rhythm of salt spray and gull cries, of Arya's quiet drills on the forecastle, and Tyrion's sarcastic banter during cramped midday meals. Lyanna took night watches beside Grey Worm, trading memories of Ned's boyhood for stories of unsullied discipline. Their laughter carried across moonlit water like ghosts remembering warmth. Bran remained below, in a dedicated cabin warded with runes by red priests. Ravens nested in the rigging, cropping fish flung up by leaping dolphins. The first sign came 4 days' sail south of the Arbor, a patch of ocean as smooth as black glass, miles across, reflecting stars though sun still rode high. Davos ordered a wide berth. As they skirted the edge, the water's mirrored surface shattered inwards, revealing a shaft of wine-dark sea plunging deeper than their sounding lines could reach. From that abyss rose a soft, keening hum, no ear felt but all bones knew. Bran shuddered in his bunk. Ravens shrieked, scattering. The Stormrunner's figurehead, a leaping stag, cracked along one antler. For an hour none spoke, breathing shallow, until the sea closed again, and the false calm resumed. That night Jon dreamed he was climbing the wall once more, yet beneath each ice-crusted step lay fire, not frost, orange veins pulsing through the ancient blue. Upwards he climbed, hand blistering, until at the summit he met the Night King, not shattered fragments but whole, who handed him a rose burning with green fire. "Plant it," the specter whispered, though its lips never moved. John woke slick with sweat, despite a chill wind. Outside the cabin port the water rippled weirdly, as though stirred by something vast passing underneath. At dawn a shout rose from the crow's nest, island off the starboard beam. All hurried to rail. It was a jagged tooth of rock rising from a tangle of mist. No beach, only cliff. Large shapes circled its summit on sluggish wings. Drakes, John first thought. Heart quickening, but as sunlight pierced the fog, feathers glinted, not scales. Albatrosses by the hundreds, plumage mottled gray-green like oxidized bronze. They anchored in a natural inlet, where tide suck sounded like heavy breath. A landing party rowed ashore. John, Lyanna, Arya, Grey Worm, Davos, Tyrion, and two unsullied. Bran remained aboard, eyes already distant. The moment John leapt onto moss-slick stone, cold bit through his boots. Winter ice trapped beneath rock, though the air above felt almost warm. They ascended a fissured path. Strange patterns etched the cliffs, spirals overlapping 8-pointed stars. Tyrion traced one with gloved fingers. Valyrian. He shook his head. No alphabet I know. Deeper they climbed until the path funneled into a canyon, open to a sky strangely pale, rimmed by towering basalt walls bright with lichen glowing faintly blue. In their midst stood a structure unlike any holdfast. Concentric rings of stone ribs, grown rather than built, as if a giant nautilus shell had solidified mid-swirl. A single vertical slit opened near its apex, emitting a steady pulse of green-white light, soft as moonshine but with weight that pressed behind the eyes. Arya muttered, "I hate echoes that stare back." John drew Longclaw. Lyanna laid a cautionary hand on his wrist. "Let words walk first." They stepped inside. The interior chamber was circular, walls lined by those stone ribs. At its center rose a spindle of translucent crystal, humming with the same low frequency that had rattled hull planks. Within that crystal swam motes, tiny lights flickering like fireflies under river ice. They formed patterns, collapsed, reformed, faster than thought. Tyrion gazed, mesmerized. A lens. His voice barely a breath. Bran's hinge, perhaps. Light refracted through memory. Grey Worm scanned the perimeter. No threat? Lyanna's eyes narrowed. Threat hides in absence as easily as in shadow. Davos approached a wall rib and found his breath frosting despite air warmth. Suddenly John stiffened. He felt it too. The same bone-deep chill he had once felt when facing a White Walker, but braided now with a heat that pricked his skin as though tiny embers drifted just above flesh. A whisper rippled across the chamber, issuing not from one throat but from the crystal itself, through marrow, not ears. "Welcome home." Lyanna's hand went to her dagger. "Who speaks? Answer the question of origin." Tyrion swallowed. "Do you want our names, or our history?" "Origin is wound." John stepped forward. "And you are the blade?" The motes spiraled violently. Arya braced. Grey Worm lifted spear. But the hum softened. "We are the hinge of turning where silence meets breath." Tyrion exhaled. "Poetry from a rock." "Splendid." John raised his voice. "If you hold cold and fire in balance, why spill either into our world? Balance requires witness." "Witness to what?" "To the choice." Long silence. John glanced at Lyanna. Her face was calm but eyes shone with fierce speculation. "What choice?" she asked. "That which the first laughter once postponed." Arya frowned. "The prince at the gate?" she whispered. Tyrion's brow knitted. "Oh, cosmic jest. Did the eye test us and fail? Now this hinge wants confirmation." Davos, voice rough with fear, muttered, "Or maybe it's a lock waiting for the right key." John turned back to the crystal. "If choice is demanded, speak plainly. The song you gave the void soothed its hunger, but dimmed our light. The gate must seal or swing, we cannot close it alone." Lyanna stepped beside John. How? And exchange heart for heart, song for dream. At that instant, Bran's ravens shrieked overhead, scores of black shapes swirling through the slit in the roof, to perch around the chamber's rim. Bran's voice issued from all their beaks at once. Do not bargain blind. The motes within the crystal flared. An image formed in midair. Bran seated beneath weirwood boughs, eyes white, tears of blood flowing. Another flared, Daenerys clutching her belly, doubled in pain while Rhaegal roared above the dragon pit. A third, Sansa kneeling in Winterfell snow, a raven falling dead at her feet. Jon's heart hammered. Enough. The motes dissolve. Choice stands witness, not threat show the mirror, and pass. Tyrion murmured, Mirror. Heart for heart. Could it ask for life in exchange for keeping winters at bay? Lyanna's voice grew stone hard. Or ask we surrender laughter so cold and fire stay bound? Arya scoffed. Not happening. Grey Worm faced Jon. What is command? Jon sheathed the long claw. He stepped to the crystal, palm out. You say we must witness choice. Here is mine. The living will surrender nothing of joy or heart. We will mend the gate ourselves if we must, but we will not trade life. He touched glass. It was neither warm nor cold, but impossibly both. He felt his memories flicker. Snowball fights outside Winterfell, Ygritte's voice in a cave, Daenerys laughing as Rhaegal splashed in Blackwater Bay, and these images shone across the moats like lantern reflections on dark water. The hum deepened. Sympathetic resonance, matching Jon's heartbeat. Then Lyanna laid her hand atop his, letting her own memories flood. Riding through Wolfswood, Ned plucking her from a stream where she'd tumbled, Rhaegar's harp under the Tower of Joy. Arya, unasked, joined them. Needle dances in Winterfell courtyard, the taste of hot bread stolen from kitchen, the sound of Gendry's laugh at a forge. Grey Worm added the feeling of Melisandre's hand in his, the sound of unsullied ranks chanting freedom. Davos brought a vision of his son Mathos calling him father. Tyrion at last set a stubby finger to the crystal, offering the moment Shay first told him he was worth more than gold, and the moment he realized she lied, both grief and hope bound as one. The crystal blazed white. Ravens cried. A ringing note, pure, absolute, burst outward, so loud it shook gulls from cliff ledges. Mist erupted through the roof slit, spiraling skyward like released breath. When vision cleared, the motes all drifted slowly, coalescing into a single symbol. An infinity loop twisted of two threads. One icy blue, one ember red, meeting parting, meeting again. Balance renewed witness accepted gatemens. Silence returned. The crystal dulled to milky quartz. A faint warmth settled through the stone ribs, radiating outward. Snow melted from Jon's boots. Moss brightened emerald. Outside, sunlight pierced fog. Luminous. Tyrion exhaled. Well, either we succeeded or doomed time itself, but my coin's on success. Arya smirked. You're terrible at dice. They descended. At the inlet, seawater lapped clear turquoise, as though winter's bite never touched it. Davos tasted the breeze. South wind again, he said. Storm's end will smell our sails by week's end. Sails indeed filled quick. The journey home felt lighter, as if some hand had trimmed invisible ballast. Bran met them at the pier, face peaceful. It is done, he confirmed. The hinge swings no more. Daenerys, waiting just beyond the mooring stone, greeted Jon with a laugh that made dockworkers pause, startled by such unguarded sound from a queen. She kissed his salt-scruffed cheek despite onlookers. You brought more than leaves, she said, pressing a hand to his chest. You brought the world back breathing. Jon pulled from his satchel a small stone, once part of the crystal, now clear and warm as living flesh. A keepsake, he told her, curling her fingers around it. A reminder that balance isn't absence of fire or ice, but the dance between. Summer matured. Wheat stalks waved gold across fields, where last year only burnt stubble stood. At Maiden's Day in mid-harvest, the Council of Electors convened in the refurbished throne room. throne itself replaced by a simple dais flanked by 2 wooden seats carved with entwined direwolf and dragon. Delegates filed in bearing banners of houses great and humble, alongside rust-stained cloaks of the small folk. At the hour of noon, Jon and Daenerys entered together. No crowns, no sword at hip, only clasped hands. Tyrion announced the charter's ratification. Every 10 years the realm would choose its steward by conclave. No child would inherit iron by default. The watchword henceforth would be duty, not blood. Cheers rose like summer thunder. Outside bells pealed, the same bells once twisted into harbingers of terror now ringing of new order. Merchants flung handfuls of sweet almond cakes. Children chased hummingbird kites, shaped like dragons and wolves. In the dragon pit, Regal unfurled wings and soared above the city, tracing lazy spirals that left contrails sparking golden in late afternoon light. When evening fell, the first annual festival of laughter commenced on the hill of Rhaenys raised septate. Minstrels played, unsullied attempted Braavosi line dances, wooden laughter echoing when armored toes tangled. Lords shared jests about their own follies. Tyrion staged a puppet opera depicting his trial by combat with a rooster as champion, and even Qyburn cracked a grin. Amid torch glow, Jon spied Lady Lyanna watching from a terrace, face soft with wonder. A woman long absent from the world witnessing it bloom anew. He raised a mug in salute. She inclined her head, eyes bright with unshed tears. Later, in the hush between music sets, Daenerys led Jon to the dragon pit's outer wall. Lanterns bobbed below like fireflies. She pressed the hinged stone to his palm. It pulsed gently, matching their heartbeats. Our world might yet break again, she said. But if it does, we mend it together. Jon squeezed her hand. Winter taught me walls can fall. Spring taught me walls can turn to bridges. Whatever season comes, we walk it side by side. Above them, stars bloomed across darkness. No baleful green eyes, no shadowed beasts, only the quiet promise of countless stories, yet unwritten. The wind carried distant laughter over ramparts, twining with the soft thrum of dragons roosting, and the low murmur of a city, finally dreaming dreams, unclouded by dread. And Jon, for the first time since boyhood, felt utterly, unreservedly at peace. A peace built not on swords, nor on sorcery, but on the fragile, radiant insistence of the living to choose hope and sing. A hush lay over the crownlands on the morning ravens announced harvestfall. The new festival Daenerys and Jon had decreed to mark the turning from high summer to mellow autumn. Mist drifted across the Blackwater rush, thin as a bride veil, pearl-tinged where sunrise touched it. In the Red Keep's godswood, dew clung to the transplanted heart tree, jeweled drops sliding along red leaves before falling to a carpet of sweetgrass. Jon rose from beneath its boughs, brushes of crimson leaf shadow still flickering over his face, and breathed the cool air that smelled of loam and distant pomegranate. Above him ravens circled twice before banking south, black quills sparking gold as they passed through the sunline. Their flight, Bran had said, measured the world's pulse. This morning the beat felt steady, if faintly cautious, like a convalescent beginning to trust in strength again. He walked the outer parapets, Ghost trotting at his heels. Builders had labored a full year to mend the walls. Creamy new blocks quarried in the stormlands dovetailed into scorched originals, pale seams telling a quiet story of ruin rebuilt. Down in the city, banners embroidered with entwined dire wolf and dragon fluttered from window ledges, though some households still flew their own bright sigils beside the compact colors. The mixture pleased Jon. Let every roof speak its loyalty, he thought, so long as each voice knew it sang in the same chorus. He found Daenerys on the Terrace of Hands, where trial by combat had once decided men's fates. Now broad planters overflowed with lemon trees, their waxy leaves dark against the stone balustrade. She wore a riding coat of soft gray, simple, save a line of tiny mother-of-pearl buttons shaped like eggs. She was feeding slices of fruit to Drogon, who lay coiled like a fortress wall beside the terrace, great red eyes half closed in enjoyment. Jon kissed her cheek, tasting citrus. You would spoil him. He claimed half the orchard himself, she said, scratching the scaly ridge between his nostrils. These are penance. Drogon rumbled, a sound as pleased as a cat's purr despite the thunder it stirred in Jon's ribs. The dragon's breath smelled faintly of roast lamb and burned sugar. Ravens from River Run? Jon asked. She nodded, eyes narrowing a fraction. Sir Edmure confirms an early frost nipped the western barley. He fears shortfall. Gendry's granaries can spare grain. We'll route barges up the Tumblestone. Jon brushed a stray curl from her temple. Better a slight lean in the south than hunger in the Riverlands, while winter stores are still memory. The council meets by midday. She tucked her hand through his elbow. Come. If we arrive first, Tyrion loses a wager. They paced along the lemon-scented colonnade toward the solar. Inside, Tyrion already perched at the thick walnut table, ledger open, quill dancing. He raised a brow over the rim of his wine cup. I predicted your early arrival, your graces, he said before Jon could remark. I wagered against Grey Worm, who believed you'd linger over breakfast. I thank you for my purse. Grey Worm, helmed and immaculate, betrayed no reaction. He only inclined his head to Jon. Outside eyes report unusual movement near Stonehelm. Dockhands unload casks sealed with Myrish lead. Smugglers, Tyrion said. Or spies, suggested Sansa, entering behind them. Gown the color of autumn dusk. She set a sheaf of raven scrolls beside Tyrion. Lord Corbray writes that a sell-sail captain named the Splinter King boasts of selling sand-glass bombs to disgruntled Tyroshi. A sword of crystal sand, Tyrion muttered, scanning the note. If it shatters hot, it blinds armies. Obscure and expensive. He tapped the parchment. A rum weapon. Rum? Jon asked. An old Lannister phrase, Tyrion said. A threat drunk sailors conjure to impress whores. Sansa smiled thinly. Or it could be real. The Vale's merchants swear they've seen smoke swirl purple near Stepstone's nights when no fires burn. Daenerys leaned over the table. Send Eyes of the Realm to watch Stonehelm. If sandglass bombs do exist, we must fetch them before some zealot lights the fuse. Tyrion jotted. Grey Worm saluted and withdrew. As the council fell into debate, grain routings, caravan guards, the pace of sewers beneath Flea Bottom, Jon felt a prickle along his spine. He turned. In a dark arch Bran waited, wheeled chair half hidden by hanging tapestries. His pale gaze fixed on Jon, unreadable. Jon excused himself and crossed. Bran spoke without greeting. The hinge stone you took from the aisle warms anew. Jon's hand went involuntarily to the leather pouch at his belt. Within, the crystal pulse he felt nightly, soft as a heartbeat, had grown subtly warmer these last 2 dawns. He withdrew it, shielding the glow from council eyes. It felt alive, but not threatening. What stirs? Jon asked. Not danger, alignment. There is a path the stone must walk next, or its song wanes. Bran's gaze drifted south-southeast. It calls east of Dorne. Somewhere sands meet sapphire water. Lice, Jon guessed. Stepstones. Farther, an island shaped like a tear. Ancient Correni charts name it Veltagar. Jon had never heard the word. Another hinge? Another challenge? An echo rather than hinge. A vault of dreams the Valyrians sealed and lost. The stone seeks a twin. Together, they finish a chord you began. Jon suppressed a sigh. He had hoped the Isle adventure was epilogue, not prologue. Yet the warmth in the crystal was real. How urgent. Before winter's second moon, Bran said. Dawn plain, unbending. Daenerys joined them, reading concern in Jon's face. Bran repeated his vision. She brushed the stone, eyebrows lifting at its heat. We only just returned. The realm holds, Bran assured. Its bones are healing, but songs sung halfway can unravel. Then we'll finish it, she said. But not with half our strength. Drogon flies wherever I fly." To that Jon had no objection. If dragon wings could shorten peril, bring them home sooner, he would gladly welcome their thunder. Sansa, listening from the table, stepped forward. "I will sit the council," she offered. "Leave Jaime and 300 Dawn's hammer to keep the peace. Rivermen trust Edmure, Northerners trust me." Jon clasped her hand. "I trust you with more than the realm." Preparations spun anew. Within a fortnight, the expedition assembled. Daenerys riding Drogon, regal to ferry Bran and Arya, Jon astride a saddle behind his queen. Though he would prefer solid decks beneath him, he conceded the speed. Grey Worm commanded a support flotilla, 5 swift galleys bearing supplies and unsullied archers, Davos again at helm of the Stormrunner. Tyrion argued he should remain to chaperone the council. They agreed, sensing he might talk a storm into submission, but was ill-matched for unknown isles. On the eve of departure, Jon wandered the mews where ravens croaked beneath torchlight. He paused outside Bran's narrow chamber. Inside, Bran slept upright, hands folded, ravens perched upon bedposts like silent sentries. Jon considered waking him, but saw Bran's lips move in dream speech, and let him lie. Instead, he fingered the hinge stone. It pulsed in rhythm with Bran's breathing. At dawn, the dragons launched. The city spilled into streets to watch, cheers drowning gull cries. Drogon surged first, great wings fanning heat that rattled window shutters. Rhaegal followed, emerald scales shimmering. Arya whooped from his neck, lean body tucked behind Bran's strapped cradle. The galleys raised sail below, but dragons soon shrank to dots. Jon felt earth drop away. The rush of air stole speech. He wrapped arms around Daenerys' waist, trusting scales and sky. They flew south over the stormlands, shadows flickering across rippling wheat. By midday, they glimpsed the Circle Sea, slate blue, broken by whitecaps. Daenerys banked low over Storm's End. Gendry waved from a parapet, tiny spear of gold in the sun. By evening they roamed open water, following Bran's ravens that scouted like black sparks ahead. The hinge stone glowed stronger by mile. The second day, an updraft carried them high enough that clouds drifted beneath their talons. Their brand pointed between 2 wisps at a speck on the horizon. Veltagar, ringed by apricot shallows, a single mountain spur capped by ruins that glittered like obsidian teeth. They descended toward a shelf of white sand. Drogon landed first, raising sprays of turquoise wave. Rhaegal circled once, then settled near tide line, folding wings with a rustle like ship sails. Arya leapt free, rolling to absorb impact, grinning wide-eyed at work of dawnlight on the sea. Bran peered from his cradle. "Stone calls from within the peak," he said. Unsullied rowboats soon grounded, Grey Worm posting sentries. The air smelled different, spiced, with undertones of cracked pepper and pine. Palms bent inland, rattling their fronds in a wind that rose not from sea, but from mountain, carrying desert warmth. Jon tasted dust on his lips, though sand underfoot was cool. A path led upward, paved with hexagonal tiles of black glass half buried beneath creepers. Along each tile ran etched glyphs reminiscent of Dragonlord script, yet curling into knots like vines. Daenerys traced one with gloved hand. "I think this is Valyrian," she murmured, "but older than any taught me." They climbed. Midway they reached a plateau where petrified trees encircled a dry pool. Crystal stalagmites jutted from the basin, colorless in shade. But when Drogon's passing shadow moved, facets caught light and refracted rainbow shards. Bran lifted a hand. "The twin sleeps beneath," he said. The pool floor revealed a hewn spiral stair descending into gloom. Jon led, Longclaw's bare steel catching faint glimmers. Below, a vaulted chamber unfolded, larger than the dragon pit, ceiling lost to darkness. At its heart, a monolith rose, twin to Jon's hinged stone, yet massive. 10 feet high, shot through with twin braids of color, one frost blue, the other ember red. It did not glow but seemed to drink the dim lantern light. Jon drew the small crystal. At once the monolith pulsed in reply, inner veins brightening. An echo thrummed through floor and bones alike. Unfinished note, yearning resolution. Arya loosened a dagger. Grey worm drifted to flank Bran. Daenerys reached for Jon's free hand. Together they approached. Jon pressed the smaller crystal to the monolith. A soft click, like a lock accepting key. The blue and red veins brightened, raced upward, twining, until the entire pillar blazed rose gold. Warmth flooded the chamber, scent of summer meadows and snowmelt mingling. Light expanded outward in a sphere. Images spilled across the glowing skin. A weirwood leaf trembling, a hatchling dragon cracking shell, children laughing beside northern lakes, unsullied singing a wordless chant as dawn painted slums pink. Not memories, but possibilities. Then the images stilled, replaced by a shape that resolved into the infinity loop symbol, glowing brighter before slowly fading. When the light diminished, the little crystal had fused to the pillar. No seam remained. Bran spoke into the hush. The cord is whole. Balance latches. Daenerys exhaled. So simple, after so long. Simple as planting buds after frost, Arya said. Work starts once winter ends. A tremor rippled beneath their boots. Dust shook loose. Jon tensed, but Bran's calm stilled him. Not quake. Heartbeat. Still, Grey Worm dispatched scouts topside. Minutes later a call echoed. Flames. They climbed back to plateau. Twin plumes of light shot from the summit's crest, one blue, one red, intertwining into sky like twisting dragons. They reached the high clouds, then dispersed, leaving a shimmer of silver across the heavens as though a second dawn spread. The sea mirrored the shimmer. Jon noted current smoothing as if the very ocean exhaled content. Drogon roared approval. Rhaegal answered, voice deepening until air itself shivered. Bran smiled. Serene. Gate is sealed, he said. No hinge left ajar. That night they camped on the beach, unsullied, ringed around crackling driftwood fires. Arya taught soldiers a Braavosi lyric about cats and cobblers. Laughter vaulted into star-speckled sky. Daenerys and Jon walked the tide line, warm foamed water lapping boots. Overhead the aurora left by the pillar still glimmered faintly. This time I think it's finished, Jon whispered, arm around her shoulders. Perhaps, she said, resting her head against him. But even if new darkness rises, we know the song. Back in King's Landing, Sansa received the raven bearing only 2 words, cord complete. She wept quietly in the council chamber, then drafted a decree establishing Harvestfall as a day of unity henceforth, to mark every year when the realms of men first sang darkness to sleep. Weeks later, dragons carried Jon and Daenerys home. The city's cheers thundered, but louder still rang the bells, all towers pealing at once in the harmony forged on the day of convergence. Tyrion met them at the terrace, clutching legal scrolls. Why, you sealed the cosmos, he said dryly. We ratified flood control levies, taxed silk imports, and convinced Lady Lionel Corbray to marry a farmer's daughter in token of high-low alliance. He handed them quills. Sign here and here. Daenerys laughed and signed. Jon signed, then dragged Tyrion into a 3-way embrace that almost spilled the imp's wine. Believe it or not, Tyrion coughed, I prefer mortal peril to public affection. Autumn deepened. Grain flowed. Roads bustled. The inaugural electors' mood approached. Weeks before the ballots, Warhorn rumor predicted fractious voting. But when the day arrived, each delegate cast polished stones into iron bowls, shaped by Gendry for the occasion. The votes were tallied in the dragon pit, Bran overseeing. And by near sunset, the result shone clear. Jon and Daenerys elected co-stewards of the realm for 10 years by overwhelming consent. Their modest wooden seats replaced a melted simulacrum of thrones in folk songs, though Jon still preferred the plain bench beneath the lemon tree. On the night after their investiture, they slipped from feasting halls to the shattered greenhouse. Tyrion had repurposed as rookery for rare blooms. Moonlight silvered leaves, glass shards glimmered like dew. Jon produced 2 items, Rhaegar's harp and a rolled parchment of fresh vows. He played the first notes, the Harvestfall hymn, familiar yet laden with new promises, then read aloud. I, John of House Stark and Targaryen, take Daenerys of Stormborn to share long summers and longest winters, to speak truth when silence tempts, to find laughter where shadow creeps. He signed. She followed in similar words, voice trembling, tears bright but unshed. Ghost bayed approval. Drogon rumbled distant. They sealed the vow with kiss and quiet laughter, moonlight pooling around them like a blessing. Years would pass. Jon would lead envoy trains into Yi. Daenerys would negotiate dragon hatchling pacts with the Summer Isles and design riders' academies where lowborn youths might bond drakes. Arya would captain a slender black ship exploring west of Old Valyria, maps ever growing. Gendry would craft bridges across rivers once spanned only by ruin. Sansa would shepherd northern townships into bustling trade hubs, and Bran would remain sentinel in the Weirwood's dream veins, his ravens patrolling skies that knew no eye. But all that lay fat in the harvest of tomorrow. On this night, they lingered in a world quiet, balanced, ice and fire conjoined not in war but in music. Beyond shattered panes, constellations newly bright traced loops across heavens that seemed cleaner for every chorus sung. And beneath those stars, a dire wolf and dragon curled together in the heart of a realm, finally wise enough to guard its laughter as fiercely as its crowns, and to cherish every fragile, fearless dawn yet to bloom.